YouTube part going.
So what are y'all looking at? Okay. Thank you very much. We're going to go ahead and call to order the meeting of call the order the meeting for the Community Center. Let's see. We will have, I believe, one councilman with the Zoom, and then we have one attending today. So we'll go ahead and leave out the roll call. That's our
Yes, let's start with Councilmember Stevenson. Here. Vice Mayor Beebe.
Here.
Mayor Coulson.
Here.
Commissioner Colorado.
Here.
Commissioner Short. Here. Commissioner Smith. Here. Commissioner Warren. Here. Commissioner Say.
Here.
And Chair Pop.
And Michael
And sorry. And Councilmember Brown.
joining us from the.
Here, thank you.
Thank you. All these.
We can't hear him very well as we're waiting for him. Okay, great. Thank you all very much for giving up your Saturday. City Manager Goldman and Director Gardner just informed us that this will be the last Saturday morning that we'll do this. Last time we'll do this on Saturday. We're going to try to do this in the future under the next mayor to evening, like a Wednesday, 6 o'clock. So, 6 to 9. So anyway, I think that'll work out really well. The first, we have no request for remote participation by 2449. I'll turn it over to Kevin Gardner, who is going to give us an overview of the meeting.
Great. Thank you, Mayor Coulson, and welcome everybody, members of the council and the commission. So this is our annual joint planning commission city council meeting. It's a chance for both to have a somewhat informal discussion of items that are top of mind right now, and they're not action items, so it's really a chance to dive in and ask a lot of questions and give direction to staff. There's 3 items on the agenda. The first is to look at the Mills Act as it applies to historic preservation policy and programs here in Burlingame. The second is to look at our general plan forward and work that we need to do next year, also opportunities that may provide. And then the last is to look at our multi-unit building standards. And that was maybe a bit of a grab bag. We have a number of different items that have just been percolating, so we thought let's make an item let those come to the surface. So there is, please help yourself to refreshments, and this is informal, so you can get up during it. Like this, that all works. Stuff there. So, thank you, everybody. Look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Great. Next item on the agenda is public comments for anything not on the agenda. I see we do have some members of the public here, as well as possibly people online requesting to leave report. Is there any member of the public that would like to comment on anything that's not on the agenda today? Okay. Great. We're going to move to item 6. A Mills Act and Historic Preservation in the Senate. We have approximately 45 minutes allocated for this topic. I'll turn it back over to Ruben here, who I want to acknowledge our planning manager. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you also our city attorney. Turn it over to you.
Great, thank you. So I've got some notes prepared, and then moving time in as we discuss things. But just to So one thing today, we don't have slides, so these are all verbal presentations. And starting with that, I will talk to you for a minute or two, and then I'll hopefully frame things and open for a lot of questions that people may have. To provide context on the Mills Act and historic preservation incentives, the general plan includes a number of goals, policies, and programs intended to support the preservation and adaptive reuse of historic resources in Burlingame. Among the policies is policy C 3.7, which specifies participation in the California Mills Act with a property abatement program to provide property owners historic resources and economic incentive in the form of tax relief to restore, preserve, and maintain qualified historic property. The Mills Act grants local governments the authority to enter into contracts of owners with qualified historic properties and to who are interested in restoring and maintaining those properties. It is voluntary, so this would be for a property owner that wants to sign up and wants to do some restoration on their property. It must be tied to a restoration project, so it's not just a tax credit for owning and maintaining a historic home. The contract includes the scope of work, and the tax credit is commensurate with the amount of work and maintenance that would be involved in the project. In order to qualify for the Mills Act, the property must have been determined to be eligible for listing on either the national or state register, and then it must also be listed in either the national, state, or a local register. Listed in the National Register of Historic Places or located in a historic district, we don't have any of those, or listed in any state, county, or city official register of architecturally significant places and landmarks. The city does have a local register, so that would be an option should the property be considered eligible for it. In Burlingame, eligibility would need to be determined by having the property owner commission a historic resource evaluation. So that would be on their own dime. It would be something they would want to do as part of their due diligence. The exception would be that some of the resources have already been identified in the downtown. In downtown, there's a total of 23 properties that were determined to be eligible back in 2008. That number could grow larger now because the threshold typically is you look at any properties that are 50 years old or more in practice, start with 45, now that time moves. So given that survey was prepared in 2008, there are buildings now that were not 50 years old at that time that would be now, could be eligible. So 23 we know are at least documented. And then on El Camino Real, Caltrans did an EIR for the dual project, and that identified 29. The reason we're bringing this up and why it's as a discussion from time to time, planning staff have been approached by property owners interested in the Mills Act, and up until now we've just said, well, we've got the provisions in the zoning code, we've got the policies, but we haven't actually created a program. So there's no application form, we don't have a program in place yet. So while the zoning code does have those provisions, we need to put together the program. This would include determining things like the amount of tax incentives, what would qualify, the local criteria, and possibly a limit on the number of contracts if that's a concern. Some cities will just cap it at a certain number, so they kind of balance the property tax with the interest. Of course, putting this together, we haven't done this yet. This involves some costs, so we solicited a proposal from a consulting firm that has prepared Mills Act programs of their jurisdictions. They have also brought on board an economist who deals with the property tax piece, because that's one of the questions we get a lot is, how much property tax would I save? And honestly, we don't know. That's not our, we don't have that kind of background. So economic planning systems would be part of that. The total amount for putting the program together would be $68,000 should we want to do that. The consultant is not under contract kind of put forward a route that we think will work, but if there is an amount of property tax that the city and county would not, there is an amount of property tax that the city and county would not collect, so that is a consideration. So that's, I think, why some cities do limit the number of contracts, is that you are taking that out of your general. I do want to emphasize that the Mills Act is only be considered for eligible properties individually. That is different than a neighborhood or a district. For those that are following Baywood and San Mateo, that is a district that is being considered. Here we're just looking at eligible properties individually. The big difference is that the district can be nominated and go through the process of the listing. With the individual property, it's nobody can sign somebody up again for the Mills Act without their permission. So it's really something that it does kind of run into some of the issues we have with you and that aside, just for this particular discussion in terms of looking at Mills Act eligibility, but in this case, we're really looking at creating a voluntary program. So with that said, it's kind of informational, but it's also to get input and answer a lot of questions. There are a lot of questions, and it does dovetail with a lot of other kind of related and generally related issues related to historic preservation. So welcome questions and discussion.
First, we're going to open up for questions, and then we'll turn it over to members of the public to see if anyone has any comment or public comment. All right, so we'll open up for questions.
So do property owners who have gone through the process and then applied, they have recourse when you say, well, we don't have a program? It's a state.
So as it is now, that is something we could get opinion from the consultant, because I don't think you can go retroactively, if that's the question. In that, part of putting together the Mills Act contract is to get approval of the scope of work, and the city needs to then say, yes, we think this is a proper use of the Mills Act, and it would apply to the different criteria that has been established by the city in setting up a contract. So if somebody's done a project already, they would not have.
Yeah, I'm thinking more conceptual, like can they force the issue?
Oh,
But it's in the US.
yeah, I suppose they could say, hold on, you've got this policy and you've never enacted it. Yeah, it's, so I would say if an outcome of this conversation is we don't want to do this, then it would behoove the city to the program. In terms of certainly the city attorney's talking about relative risk, it's, there's some things that are kind of flaring risks and lower down the list in terms of challenges, but it is, somebody could, when we have had conversations with people, they come forward, usually they don't even know that we have it in the general plan. They just kind of heard about it. I've heard about this Mills Act and how much money can I save? That's usually what they ask. And then we say, well, hold on. First of all, we don't have more yet. Second of all, the money you save is commensurate with the work you're doing. So, and that sometimes that it's a conversation. And you say, oh, okay, I thought it was just a work. So that's maybe where the way.
Just one other. So there's 52 properties already. Do you have any guess?
No, so we've never really done a comprehensive inventory, and maybe that's the elephant in the room that we don't know until something has come along. So in the case of El Camino Real, it was that Caltrans had to do NIR, and they were obliged to do inventory. With the downtown specific plan, that was an interest of the community at the time. That was built into the work program. There is an obligation as you do plans to, so for example, the Broadway specific plan, there would be inventory for two reasons. One is that that is an interest of the community, but it's also something that's that it's the historic resources are covered. And then, sorry, just to finish upon, you'll notice in the various big development projects you've seen, each one does discuss whatever is on the site and would it qualify for historic status. So it is a box that has to be checked with any big development project. But we have not systematically, other than the couple of surveys that we've done, we haven't been systematic.
So just backtracking a little bit, so that including myself understand this, if a resource appears on Mineral, Broadway, or previously, is the property owner therefore obligated to protect everything historically they can't renovate if they appear on this list, or it's just that they opt into it? They are eligible.
So that it kind of comes down to what kind of renovation they would be doing. So let's just say there's a mid-century apartment building around.
Right.
But let's say they want to change out the windows or something. If they're not going through discretionary review, then there isn't anything that prevents them from doing those kinds of renovations. Where the issue comes up is if there is a discretionary permit, like design review, demolition, adding, whatever, anything that that's when we need to do the see is this proposed project affecting whatever that aspect is of the building, whether it's considered a good architectural example. If it's something that's events, that's a little different because it's, so certainly if they're just maintaining the building, it doesn't really make much difference. It's only a project.
But once a property is identified on some kind of a list, if they're going in for design review or something, then it becomes a requirement to go through some process. And so we have a local register. But you said, can other neighbors or people that have concern about a property maybe get it reviewed so it can be nominated for the register, or is it solely either through these planning documents or owner initiative?
I mean, I would think it would be odd to have somebody pay to do an evaluation for a property that's not theirs.
But what if it were in their neighborhood and they really wanted it, and they wanted to kind of like, could a property be put on the register?
So not fully, but what does happen and where this occurred with planning projects in the past is where a neighbor may have some documents that say, oh, I've got this photo or that or whatever, and then provides. That's related more to the CEQA. So should the planning division receive information that says, oh, this may be because of this, that, or the other, this may be a historic resource, then we are duty bound to do that evaluation. And that is a property owner's expense.
That's regardless of whether we have an offense.
Yeah, that occurs today.
Yeah, I'm just trying to understand how this works.
Yeah. But to kind of finish the thought, that doesn't mean that they have to be listed. It just means that the property is eligible. As of right now, there's only one building in Burlingame on the local register. It's the Chief Department Post Office, and that was a requirement. We needed that listed on a register or extraordinary since that were requested. So for CEQA, it's, the bar is a little lower. It's considered eligibility for listing, but in order to get the benefits of the Mills Act, you have to go the next step and actually get it registered.
Put it on.
Yes. And
But in
the
all
way we could do it
property
with the Mills Act is we can say only the property owner can initiate that. It doesn't, anyone can initiate the CEQA review, and that's just how CEQA is set up. But in terms of registering a project, a property that doesn't, as we're talking about individual property, I'm just curious to draw this to percentage of communities in the area that have a program policy as opposed to the general plan that is identified. What's the percentage? Like how my house is 70 years old. If you started putting all those homes on, you're gonna have to see it. Right? No.
So age itself is not, the bar is actually fairly high for eligibility. So yeah, there's plenty of buildings that are 45, 50, 70. And we are often surprised with the evaluations we get where we're like, surely this has got to be one. And then they just say, this is a nice house, but it doesn't meet any of the criteria that we have in the memo. You've got to meet, one of those three. In terms of number, I don't know the exact number of Bay Area, ballpark it somewhere between 10 and 20%. It's a fairly low number, but it's not completely unheard of. So, Palo Alto has one, Keep has one. Sure, what other peers, the consulting, Denisha, so there are cities that do have, what they all have in common is they were developed pre-war, they developed their neighborhoods. But again, that doesn't necessarily mean, they have a pretty nice house and it's just
Sure. Question. With regard to this question, I just found out that fewer than 20 houses or buildings that's in the north city. So it is not used that much. That's different than permit. So it's not widely used. And I don't know if it's because people think so complicated, people don't use it, but maybe I just don't know. I've seen that, but it's not used very much. So initially it's a concern when we put it on our own policies. Oh my gosh, we'll just say town is eligible and it turned out takers. Well, pay the property tax and the tax buildings. So that is the issue. It's not that big of a deal.
Yeah, it could be one of these things where you throw the party comes because you have to first of all have that high tax base to make it attractive. So it would appeal to someone who may be purchasing a property new or relatively recently, long time owner, probably less interesting. And then you also have to have a project. So where we have discussed with applicants, I've asked, well, what would your project be? And they said, well, we just want to maintain it. Okay, maybe there's a little bit there for maintaining, but that's you're not going to get a big tax break because it's really based on doing restoration. So maybe we don't get a lot of takers, but it's also one thing where if we don't offer it, we don't know. And that's part of the discussion.
I just thought, I picture ways they could. We haven't actually voted on this budget. We saw a project the other night, and it's an addition. It's on a beautiful home that I've been in touch and very respectful. Right, just speaking. So, are you saying that your understanding is an addition like that, which is modest, it's style of house, that would not be your understanding is it wouldn't be a rebate issue necessarily, or yes, I thought it is. It could be.
Yeah, for that one, and let's talk about a little more generic.
Yeah.
Let's say somebody has a pretty well maintained older home. They're doing a fairly modest secondary addition. I mean that may be part of our local criteria. Should we give any kind of incentive to that, or is the house essentially already restored and what benefit is there to the community? Now the property owner may say, well, the reason I did the addition is they have no money for it. But where the resource is already in pretty good condition, that's a little harder to make the case. I think this is really geared for owner home that is addition. And has a good do I tear it down? Do I rebuild it?
It's really
What's the cost?
real.
Yeah, so there have been a few over the years that, and that may tip them one way or the other if, that it's, we do hear that it's, it's maybe easier, cost effective to tear down and start over, but if there is some kind of financial incentive that tips the balance, that or at least on it.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, sort of similar to our ADU policy, where in the beginning, people didn't know what they were afraid of them, people were left to right. And as we educate the public, they become more popular, people understand how they can apply to what's going on. I'm not worried about if they had a program like this, whether 1, 2, or 9, or 100 people might be interested, if they think it comes with having a program and educate the public that we have available. One area that I'm, you mentioned earlier, Kevin, that we may be able to nominate a district potentially as part of how we develop this program, but I think about our Eicher neighborhood up in the hills, up in Truesdale. Those are, about 8 homes, and they're definitely about 75 years old. Those are over 75, but that's a category of homes that were not built they were built just average homes, economically built, and utilitarian. And they have a lot of features that people want these days. A lot of modern homes actually make the style of Eichers, original Eichers, and we have many original Eichers that are dilapidated, and I formerly owned them. My family was shocked that I didn't want to try it, but I saw the potential in them, and it would be nice. I think that would be a district where this program might be of interest to residents who are afford to put into the beach to update the micro. Yours, glass, single pane glass, safe, but. I think it'd be interesting that we consider, outside of the box in terms of not just classic things.
Yeah, that is something that mid-century now is within the realm, and I'd say the Eichlers are probably the best example of something that rises to the level. They're pretty iconic. There's a lot of history involved, so there's a story, a lot of local history. I mean, that just the story of Eichler Homes is very interesting, all of it. We're not really proposing a historic district, but having said that, if there was a district, that presumably would make it easier for those who are inside contracts, because they've already, there's been a determination, but we tried to keep this a little more just, I think an Eichler could come forward at this point, and I don't know what the evaluation would be. Expert commissioners, because then maybe it would need to be a fairly good example, but not have a lot of restoration at that point.
Well, the Whitlow is that same time period. It's very special. We're done. If you can do it.
I won't. We'll
I think
need
we
to
don't
find
know
that
a
out.
lot.
Yeah, I don't know about the restaurant, to be honest.
Just to be clear, I have very little professional experience with the Mills Act. It's not something that my firm touches a lot. But I will say that from my perspective, I think that the Mills Act does a lot of extra good, does the most good when it's paired with some kind of like local level landmark or San Jose Public Structure Merit program. So these are specifically, it's a historic designation that has lower barriers to entry than the criteria that was mentioned in the National California Register, right? And the point of that is, like Kevin was mentioned, there are a lot of homes that are old, they're very nice, they're very charming, you can't build anything like them, but they don't necessarily rise to that criteria. And so that would be an opportunity to have in this case, a very owner-driven, sort of low-level grassroots way to keep those homes around, keep them well maintained, so that future future generations buy them and visit them and so on. And especially because, like we mentioned, like Bethany mentioned, this would be completely owner, it would be completely
Voluntary.
right, completely voluntary, right? So somebody else, I've seen some places write it into their city code that says the only way to get on the local register is to have the owner ask for it specifically. So it's because it's not dealing with the California National Register, you can write it that way. So a neighbor might like a home, but they might not be able to force that onto the register. And that's just a compromise that people have come up with over time that I've seen other people do, but every city doesn't do it. So that's just from my perspective, it works as well.
My comment would be from that to the 2-year-old. You know, the costs around it. So that would have been a wonderful situation where I would love to have, you know, that kind of standard and, you know, figure out. Reduce your tax rate that much, and I don't think people do it to reduce their tax rate, but it gets a nice, like, for it. That comes along. So, I mean, it might only be 2,000 or 5,000 dollars a year. If they can certainly help, and I believe it transfers when you sell a property, it transfers. So then new owner would also get that. Paid for, and that might be the real value of it long term, is to sell that with the tax rate low, so that the new buyer is incentivized to not tear down a home that, like an idler that, you know, probably cheaper to tear down than it is to renovate. Yeah, yeah. And, yeah, sure. Well, let's go to public comment really quick. But I also just want to acknowledge that Catherine came in and small people, thank you so very much. Please feel free to. Part of this. How about members of the public? If any members of the public and anyone in the audience? And, welcome to Brown Ray. Did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, thank you, Madam Mayor.
So we kind of, if you have another question, certainly please feel free to ask it. Otherwise, if people want to make kind of old remarks about where they should take it.
Well, I'm just gonna start by with something that you say today. So I'll just say, I think there's a lot we don't know about this book. Too much, and a lot of things. So I think this is really good that you identify a firm that knows something that can direct some choices, direct different directions that we can do. I didn't realize that it was really tailor it to your own city. What is actually what is the action? What would qualify? I didn't understand that. If that's what you're saying. So that way, you kind of in order to predetermine. Well, maybe predetermine maybe a thoughtful renovation would qualify. Because what is someone? In a way, it is. If your city believes in that your historic fabric makes a better quality of life for everybody, which I personally believe, then why not incentivize someone who has a historic smaller house that's been identified that wants to do a thoughtful addition rather than tearing it down or moving somewhere else or whatever it may be. So I think we have to be thinking, why are people doing that? They usually are doing things because they want a bigger house. Now all the houses are a lot of big, but that tends to be this house is small, bathroom, we're gonna move, or we're gonna tear down or do something major. And so maybe we could tailor this so that we're seeing more of those. So that is my thought, but I think we need to definitely, when we figure it out, do much more wide education of the folk, even if it's a matter of, we do have some properties in Rolling Park, that is the area we've identified, but it's by no means the only area that the city is historic, that is developing. So, but we do have a number of Page Trimble and other evaluations that say this property rises to the top because we know the homes. Maybe it would be interesting, and of course, it's not retroactive, but they usually come up because somebody's doing something to their home. But maybe those 20 properties, or I don't even count how many without the dates, it's probably more than 20 in all these years we've done it. We have a meeting with them and say, and, back and forth, what would be interesting to you, and involve them because they're the ones who are affected. I mean, immediately. We already identified them, so no money. We're not doing a new survey. It doesn't sound like it's very controversial. So why not start where we are and glean from what we already know, what's been studied, and try to have a conversation. And once you chatted with your company, know something about this. I don't know anything about
Thank you for making this conversation. So I guess I'll start by comment. So I grew up in a town in New England that was founded in 16. It's like, not in California. Our home in Burlingame was built in 27. For the reason we fell in love with it. When we did a renovation, I think before to do a renovation, we took 3 keys to not change anything on the outside. That could be, and really tried to do, where we modernized, it was in the back a little bit. So I come at this with Jennifer's perspective. Preserving historic fabric doesn't do that. Please understand that. But I do think, like you said, there's a lot we don't know about this and we have to be very clear. I think a fundamental question I'm struggling with that I really want to challenge all of us to just pause as we sit here and think about this. When we create an incentive program for homeowners, incentive program really is a subsidy, it's a public subsidy, and we are taking general fund dollars from our general fund and giving it back in the form of subsidy to homeowners. And the very nature of being a homeowner in Burlington means that you have wealth. You have fill in the blank, whatever characteristic of the house. And it seems like in this discussion I'm hearing that it really is a program that would be particularly important incentive for people paying high property taxes. People who are coming in and buying their starter home for $1 million or $2 million to preserve. It may not be as attractive to folks who've been here a long time, but they could take advantage of it if they had it. But it is a subsidy that is going to take money away from libraries, parks, programming, couples. And I want us to think really carefully before we get an echo chamber, is this the best use of funds? Maybe it is, but let's think very, very carefully. Because to the point where it may only be, these renovations are really expensive, you get millions of dollars. If it really is a $5,000 a year property tax rate, that's a nice thing to create incentive. It's not going to be a game changer. A lot of these projects are already happening. People want to do them the right way. We probably have lost a few homes. Maybe it could have been inspired, but where do we go with this? Like, are we going to cap it? I certainly hope we would cap it. We would not want to pay for anybody's renovation property value. So if we're going to cap it at $5,000 to $10,000 a year, is that really going to be the difference maker? Is that the best use of public funds? So I just want us to think about that. I'd like to know what the financial, I'm glad we have an economist, what the financial impact of property tax value is on the city. We are not flush right now, a lot of extra. We're not sucking it all away in our great reserves. We're finding the black again, but is this the right time? I would absolutely want no retroactivity for people who've already done the project and have a historic home and paid for it, found a way. I don't think we should have retroactivity. I would hope we could cap it. It would have to be voluntary. How do we undo it? If 2 years into it, the property owner dies, they want to sell the home, the new owner obligated, what if they want to renovate? Is it a process to undo the threat? If it truly is property owner driven, how do we protect against policy that has some unintended consequences? So I just want us to really think through it and then for how can we keep our community beautiful and honor the historic that people are doing. Anyway, thank you for listening.
Thank you. I'd like to learn more about the act and what's behind it. On the surface, the incentive seems to be preserve something that's historic and adds quality to the community, but the incentives seem to be all financial. I don't see those things historic lining up all the time. I actually think I was kind of curious about the original intent of the act wasn't to give financial benefit necessarily to homeowners to preserve something. When we remodeled our house in 1998, there was a formal design review process for any home. And that policy guided us to say, we have a 1930s Spanish style home. We're going to keep it a 1930s Spanish style home with everything we do from an external addition, modernize the infrastructure, of course. So I'm curious about how this policy or program versus just a nice design review process is. This is, we're trying to preserve some character for all the homes. It's not just ones that maybe qualify or rise to this level. So that's kind of more of a question, and I would, certainly like to see the reports from the consultant in terms of what's the history, what's the economic impact, what's a good process. Clearly, the number of cities that have adopted something formal is pretty low still. And as you said, Jennifer, even in San Francisco, where literally 90% of the homes probably, or at least are eligible to apply or could potentially, there's only so many that have actually taken advantage of it. And I would, in terms of like what you said, Andre, that, I grew up in Palm Hill with that world, and so that's kind of intriguing, but I like the local aspect more than a state or, a regional kind of driven program. And I also like the owner driven part. So, that's what I call it.
Okay. So, one of my questions is that we had a number of homes that now been deemed historical. And my understanding of the historical renovation, and maybe I'm wrong, that's why I'm bringing it up, is that you have to, if you're going to change your windows out, you actually have to go and find like more of a historical window guy that actually will change your windows as they are already in a home. So those costs, my understanding from some of the projects I've seen, I've talked to, those renovations that they want to do with their homes, whether it's Mills Act or Historical Act, they have to go to a company that actually is really serviced in that historical process. And the cost of those renovations are much more exorbitant than what we normally see. And maybe some of the other colleagues that are planning for architects know this. But even a railing has to be done by hand. And so, in my opinion, the cost of a renovation for something that would be on the Mills Act is so much higher than what we would normally see if somebody goes through that in the guard or the industry. So I would, if somebody wants their home to be in the Mills Act, they're taking on that extra expense to preserve their home. And then if that's the case, then why wouldn't we want to help them to sort of come with some sort of compensation or benefit to them? So I just want to put that out there. I'm not sure if I'm right or wrong, but that's my understanding of what I've seen when I talk to some of my developers and some of the people in my, when I live in Burlingame Park, and some of the people that have been in Burlingame Park. When I literally had the listing at 1549 Burlingame Avenue, there were a number of people. That house did not come up as historical, but there were a number of people that were considering renovating that home and getting it on the registry for a Mills Act if it came out. So I don't want to dissuade people from doing that, but the cost of renovations, number one, is really high now, but doing historical renovation can be much more higher than what we pay.
I know, I wanted to, I want to agree with Sandy, exactly what you just said. What you were talking about reminds me of a project that we had before us on the planning commission with John and Sandy. I think we're the only ones there. There were two sets of best friends who bought properties next to each other on Vernal. And they just assigned one lot to each other. And the best friend got this lot that had a garage on it. And then they were able to tear it down, build, two-story home, and everything they wanted, and met all the planning guidelines. And then the couple, I think, that initiated the whole idea of buying these two properties ended up having a home where the very one section of the front facade was historical. And they had to go through such painstaking efforts and multiple meetings with us to ensure that their architect was working with them to preserve that one section, and everything had to be built exactly back to the original state. And I really felt for them.
But then they knocked it over. That was the.
Oh, well, during construction, yeah, then
They
they knocked
knocked
it
it
over,
over,
then they had
oops.
to like
Yeah.
really rebuild it back again, like project, right, exactly.
A mess.
Maybe you want to.
I
So-
know, I paid attention to that one.
So anyway, I just feel like there are a lot of costs, and I think that this is a self-initiated interest where one would want to be or is interested in the historical preservation of one property, and you want to go about this. And I think that having the program is great as a catalyst towards preservation, sustainability, further maintenance on the home. But maybe we set criteria on, I don't know if we can establish like how the money is used. I mean, it's a tax break, so I guess you're not really showing what you're doing with the money. So I think there's a lot to explore in how we develop the program and set criteria. And
This particular, to deal with time, I'm gonna try to wrap it up here. Michael, do you have anything? Browner, Mr. Browner, no?
Sorry, I thought you were talking to our wonderful city attorney. No, I'm good. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, John.
I just want to throw one quick idea in there, that doesn't need an answer.
Yeah.
But I understand what Emily is saying about the economics of this, but if I were buying, I'd actually be more scared of the process. It's so much more onerous to go through that process. When you have an asset,
You choose to go through it or not.
well, right, but we make it harder. And so maybe the consideration is less about money, but if I were going to get it registered and put in the effort of going through this pain, how do we make it less painful from our point to the owner so that they are incentivized to actually go through it rather than a beating to do something good?
They're very scared of it because should have this conversation since the tail. Nobody knows anything.
Yeah.
So I do agree with that, and I'm gonna wrap it up here. I think there's a lot of people who are who misinterpret and misunderstand that they're two totally different conversations. The first one is historic resources, which is sort of beyond your getting to say whether your house is or isn't. It just either is or isn't, and it's Page and Turnbull comes in or somebody does a review, and right now your neighbor can ask for it. If you live in Burlingame Park, you must pay for it. I think I have to do one. off my property. There's certain areas where you have to do it. We don't have a historic registry for the entire city. And we've chosen not to do that. It's like a $300,000 or $400,000 project. We can lift every single property that was historic. So you end up with problems like what you have, Audrey, which is somebody buys, they don't know it's historic, or they're in contract, and then a neighbor, that's how the neighbor problems start. This is completely different. The Mills Act, is federal act, state act that was set up in order to help people, as Cindy said, who, when you renovate to the standard, so like my house is not historic, but I renovated it to the historic standards. And have somebody have to hand make every single window in the house is very expensive. So, and I don't know that it's necessarily true. I mean, that, you know, when you really look at what it is, even if it's only 5 or 6 houses, but a lot of times these are really critical linchpin homes in a neighborhood. They kind of anchor the characteristic of the street, or they kind of anchor the characteristic of the corner. And you know, my issue is just offering people the opportunity to participate if they want. I really don't think you're going to be like, you know, impinging on the city budget. There's so many other things we do that impinge on the city budget. But this would be literally like us if it was a $1 million renovation and say that's $10,000 in income tax. We have 17 cents on the dollar. It's not a dollar for dollar, I don't think. Deferral at the most, it would be $1,700 for the year. The value of keeping that home there and the kind of neighborhood character, and to me, it would outweigh that sort of cost. And, you know, and this applies to apartment buildings too, or renters buildings. So, you know, this would help an apartment building owner to be able to, if they had to do work on it, they can apply for this. We can help subsidize it, and it could keep the rent up for apartment building, because they wouldn't, you know, other things would maybe not have to pass through quite so many expenses into which they can pass through into the cost of the apartment renovation. So that to me, it can apply. It doesn't just apply to single family homeowners. It applies to anyone who owns property, commercial, residential, multi-family residential. So I think the tax benefit wouldn't just go to single family. I think it would equally be spread among the person. So from that standpoint, I think it would be, I think it's a good next step to at least understand it, understand how we can customize it for us. I love your offer. And then get a report out and we can make a decision based on more facts.
I'd like to get help though. I mean, if we talk to those historical people, folks, their perception of what they know is smart, we have an idea what the money is that, what the average is for something like this, because we'd be interested to see what owners, business owners, what that cost is to them.
And then Jen, if you want to go back to the 20 people we know who have historic homes, we have them. But what I would ask them is, would this?
Oh, I'm not gonna go.
No. What I would ask them is, would this have made any? Would this have helped you,
Well, that,
or
that,
made any sense for you if it had been available? That
would you gonna take her? They run for 10 years, I thought.
I think it does run for 10 years.
And they can be.
So I just think understanding more about it and the difference between identifying historic resources, which is one thing, and then allowing anyone who has an older home to be able to apply for that, or partner or commercial building. So that would be my suggestion. I just had a show of hands if people are like no on this, or if people are interested in having it down for sale, but some buffer comes down.
I'm concerned about more, but I expect that to
Come down, to do that, come up. Okay, so I think we have vast majority interested in taking the next steps.
Great, thank you. And with all of these items today, nothing will get decided. They're all to be continued. This is one where the consultant will presumably be able to help us answer some of these questions and also start giving us some numbers. These kinds of points that have been raised will be really helpful to their work as well, because now they know.
And I think, Kevin, that the end game on this is if we decide to do it, we do it. If we don't, we have to change a lot of the personnel situation in our county. So it's a binary thing regardless. Okay? It's not just hanging out there. Okay. Thank you all. Sorry that went a little longer than. And if anybody has any other questions, like I have a few more, but I just didn't want to go into them. Please email them to staff and Kevin, I'm going to send my notes right now. Kevin can take a look at them and ask some what to think. Okay. Okay, this should be a short, easy one. I think. Item number B, general plan build out evaluation. I'm going to turn it back over to Kevin.
Great, thank you. And Michael Brownrigg, if I'll talk fairly loud, we're experimenting with the position of the microphone and trying to.
Much better. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And we're locally trying to, you can hear a little bit of the echo. Yeah, so anyway, thank you for, the owl seems to work really well.
Yeah, the owl.
And then also the timeframes that we've provided on these, there's wiggle room, so we know we put times on here that would allow people to finish early because it is Saturday, but they're next up is our general plan environmental impact for build out discussion. We had this discussion similar to this last year and have started to figure out how to approach this topic. It's back again. We got a little better idea, but we still have questions. Council and the commission. The general plan and its environmental impact report were adopted in 2019, which seems like yesterday, but that's now been 5 years. EIR had made various assumptions at that time based on the amount of commercial and industrial space that would be developed. There were a lot of assumptions built into that based on history, on market conditions, but it was ultimately a kind of crystal ball exercise and just kind of make a guess. As we've seen these past few years, it turns out that there's been much more demand for office and particular life science development than what the general plan had anticipated. Meanwhile, there's been much less demand for industrial space and commercial space. When we say commercial, we're really thinking retail, like big stores, small stores. The staff memo does show what was in the forecast versus what has been approved, so you can kind of see. Just, we made a good guess, but we're off on a number of factors. We have been able to make things work for various projects. There's kind of from one category into the next, and then the biggest project of all needed to do its own environmental impact report, which I think it's a kind of case study as opposed to tearing off of the so we've been able to kind of make it work for this stage, but going forward, we need to look at these development assumptions and get our EIR a little more calibrated to where we think things would be going. First of all, catch up where we're at. Also, 10 or 20 years. Where this is really important is for the urban water management plan, which is obligated to be updated this coming year. And that builds off of the general plan, EIR. So, some of the discussions we've had with the urban water management plan have been related to projections for development, and then that puts a sort of limit on the amount of water that we can say is allocated. So we kind of create our own constraint. Should we expect more development, provided our guarantee, and I'm getting into territorial terms, but surprise stuff, but there's this kind of balance between what the Public Utilities Commission can guarantee versus what the city thinks it's anticipating, and we were a little short on what we thought we were anticipating, which is to say that we couldn't get more allocation. That that's maybe a tangent for here, but that's partly why this is driving this now, is we need better. We did a similar exercise with housing elements. If you'll recall, the number of units that the state passed as plan for was slightly higher than what the general plan planned for. So the general plan did a pretty good job of anticipating. We were within about 300 units of what the state ultimately asked us to provide something for. So that was done through, so good forward planning, and we're just also, good that the state did next more than the 3,000. So we were able to do, in that case, an addendum to the general plan and looked at just what is the net difference between 3,000 units and just slightly less than the general plan. And did that change any of the conclusions that we get out of? This may be a kind of similar exercise. The square footage is certainly be a little more delta than housing numbers, but that's kind of the procedure. For the office and commercial forecasts, there's maybe a little more art involved because we are trying to figure out, with housing, we get a number given to us. With commercial development, you're kind of looking into the future, looking at what the market's done, where we think it might go. And there's a lot more guesswork. But that said, we can look at a bunch of different assumptions, right? What you might expect. This is also an opportunity to look at any changes we might want to make to the general plan, given that it's 5 years old. Not necessarily inviting changes. This is something we need to do regardless, but we are in effect practical general plan. So if there are interests in looking at any of the land use or development assumptions or anything like that, we would have to think of a process for that. But we don't sort of just roll past that. People say, well, I always thought about this, that, or the other. So, although this item is mostly informational, to let you know what is coming down the pipe, it is also an invitation to, if you've been thinking of something that, why did we do this in the general plan, or did we just do that? We can at least have that conversation in this more informal setting. That I think we decided right here. This is really just forming the scope of work.
What we'll do, thank you, Kevin, that's great. I just want to ask a question. We have office, commercial, industrial, personal, retail, multi-tenant, regions, whatever.
We didn't put that in the table mainly because we've already kind of crossed that bridge in the housing element, and also the numbers they're pretty close. So the housing element basically allowed it to isolate housing.
Okay.
That part's that.
Got it. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and do the thing. We'll open it up for comments. If anyone has any thoughts or comments, questions, we'll send it back to you. This is not a big controversial thing or anything. This is really just an update for all of us together to see how close we are. And I point out that the negative right there, the difference, not that we were under with our office, we were actually over. So it's kind of counterintuitive, the numbers here. The negatives are over and the positives are under. Just so people can take a look at this, and I think Michael's good. I'm glad you have your hand up because I think you're the one who really wanted to see this. Am I calling you?
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you, Don. I'm not sure if are we on first name basis or okay. Okay, that makes things easier. Thank you. So thank you very much for beginning to surface this conversation. I think it's going to be a very important one for all of us in this room and for the community over the next year or two. So I really appreciate getting started on it. And I want to share before I ask my question that I was on the Planning Commission when the Peninsula Humane Society came through trying to build its new facility off of Rollins Road and elicited an extremely hostile reaction from a neighboring property user who felt that it was completely inappropriate to have animals in that district. And and a lot of other complaints too, but that was the main one. And the best argument we had, and it became extremely contentious for anybody who remembers it, was that it was an industrial zone. And so like, hey, I know you're doing what you're doing, but this is an industrial zone. We need to make allowance for the car mechanics, for the spray painters, and indeed for the animal caregivers who want to be in our industrial zone. So I appreciate that we have an industrial zone. That's my preface. But my question, Kevin, I think probably for you is, I wonder these days whether distinguishing between office, commercial, and R&D makes any sense, and why indeed we do it. Is it a parking requirement difference between those different formats? Because I think for many Burlingamers, they don't really see a difference between a biotech R&D facility in an office building. I mean, they're concerned about height, they're concerned about parking, sure, but I wonder whether there's utility in continuing to have these distinctions.
Yeah, I think that's a good question, and particularly with office and life science, that's what we've been asking is what is the difference? And particularly if they could flex between which do you evaluate? And that is maybe something we can ask our CEQA consultant to do if we have for this. In that, in the past it would have been traffic, but traffic analysis has changed. So now we're doing vehicle miles traveled as opposed to trip generation. Water consumption would be different, energy needed. There are some distinctions, but I do wonder if there's an option to do something that's more blended or more general.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Michael.
No, please, Emily. I appreciate that we can think about it. That's good to know. Thank you.
Yeah, I had something just to chime in, but again, I'm in workforce development, my day job. So when I think about that, my instinct is I see value in having different types of industry because it creates different kinds of jobs for different kinds of people that need different kinds of work. And if we went across the board and said everything is office, commercial, industrial, life science, we might lose, there would be such a financial incentive to lose the auto mechanic dealers, that light industry. And I think that's part of the fabric of our community. So that's my instinct, but I'm not a planner, but that's my sense.
Yeah, let me clarify something with the reason we're not seeing new
Especially
industrial
Jason
development is, and it's, so first of all, I think we should say it's not like there was a mistake in the forecast. There was just different assumptions. We are still seeing new industrial projects. They just tend to not have a net increase in the floor area. So they'll usually take an existing building, refurbish it, and then that's a big zero in terms of our table. But yeah, the general plan was very intentional, kind of providing a place for everything, and that includes the Williamsburg corridor and the interface shore area for the innovation industrial area to still be safe for industrial. It's just turned out that they're not expanding their footprints. The same with commercial or with retail. I think maybe there was a thought that there would be some big box retail development. And we all know that's the trends are now going the opposite way. And if anything, we just want to maintain good retail districts that already exist. And, so those are also unlikely to expand. It's not to say that we don't want the land use or the zoning. It's more, do we anticipate net square footage growth?
Is this going to play where we just had a party? Trying to bring in some retail space. We're seeing a lot of projects come before us and happening is here, but the life science buildings really want to keep it as one user. And so trying to create a space within that space to have a coffee shop or a little bistro or something for the community. Really for them. So we talked about it and thought maybe it's a way for us to create an incentive for the developer to maybe give them another tier, right? Give them something so that we get something back as a community. And I'd really like to try to see figure out how do we open up this discussion with developers.
Yeah,
Can I add on to that before you go?
yes, sure.
The land down there, great that we're leveraging it and the life sciences and things that we're doing are an added benefit down there. That's great. But that's also then making all of that land more valuable as that use and not as the restaurants or the other things that support that area. So, we're seeing that restaurants and public amenities are going away because we're creating a different use down there, but we're not zoned in a way or used, created a use option that makes it beneficial for somebody to be able to build restaurants or a market or anything else that we need to support. And I think it's true on Bayshore, but I think it's also true on Rollins. There's not a lot of incentives to build a Trader Joe's on Rollins. But without a Trader Joe's, is there incentive to buy or rent on Rollins as a housing? So our chicken and egg problem happens because we're maybe not coming up with the right use or zoning to encourage those developments. But then when we say we want it as part of this, it's the only time we get to ask, it's not. And I understand it's not really part of their business plan either, but we don't have another way of encouraging those kinds of things.
Yeah, so I think those kinds of discussions would certainly be part of either, changing, refining general fund policy or zoning standards. They're probably not gonna change the build out discussion for the, what have you, but those are worthy to have. I do know that, so all of the Rollins Road specific plan, we did look at the community benefits quite a bit, changed them around a little bit, in fact, created a scoring system which had not existed before to try to weight certain benefits higher than others. So for example, if you do a grocery store, you get double points. What have you. That didn't exist before, so that would be one way to approach it. There's also more regulatory approach where it's required. That may not be popular with some project proponents, but that could also create unanticipated casualties as well in terms of what if you don't find an operator. But those are things that we can look at. Those are different tools, and those are probably within the realm. I think of the study session. So that is something we can discuss. It's maybe in parallel with this build-out discussion, but those in and of themselves, I think.
Well, I was, we've kind of been going back and forth on this. And one of the thoughts that came to mind is, I know we have setbacks for our buildings and we have to have certain code as fire lanes and all that stuff. But if we could say to a developer, look, we're going to give you X amount of footage on your property. And yes, it's a variance. Yes, it's going to not be part of where you can usually build. But if you could just build us space, I'm not talking about a big space, right? I'm just talking about some place where people can go out there and enjoy being out on the bay side. Maybe they'll do it for us, right? We're giving them an extra encroachment kind of permit or variance to allow us to have what we want. We're not saying them in the budget.
Are you specifically referring to Bayfront or Rollins Road?
Both, but I'm kind of more Bayfront.
There's the same, but it's the same argument on some of the Rollins roads. It's like, I'll give you 1,000 square foot coffee stand. Like, well, that's not really gonna draw anybody to your 5,000 square foot park that's mandatory. So some of, the tiers, yes, there are benefits, but there's only so many 5,000 square foot open spaces within buildings that are actually open to the public and not just the tenants. unless there's something to do. Parking our bikes and walking is just all, it's starting to be on every project everywhere, and it's great that it's being interconnected and all that, but then there's the, why do I want to go down there if we're not building out more, alternative infrastructures that aren't just office?
I think, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I agree with Commissioner Seeger. I think that, what we've been seeing, there's a lot of interest in the, life science development on the Bayfront, up on Bayfront area. And I'm wondering how we can take a look at, just, because we never know what a developer wants to build, right? So we have to wait and see what happens. And so now that we kind of see a little bit of a trend, I wonder how we can take advantage of looking at Mission Bay or South City, where, all the other life science developments are in the whole area. If we can kind of almost master plan a little bit, we would get an opportunity to do that and kind of figure out how we can kind of balance the needs of the employees that come to the area, what they need on a day-to-day basis, dining perspective, exercise, just daily services like dry cleaning and things like that. I remember when, many years ago, I worked out in that area at Jim Marie was at a corporate office. And I remember having to get lunch, having to go all the way to Broadway to get lunch. And I'm thinking about how these hundreds and thousands of people who, if there aren't any dining establishments nearby, have to suddenly join on with everyone else who's trying to get to Broadway at lunch and cross over the train tracks. So I kind of feel like if we have an opportunity to try to master plan or figure out a way to incentivize some of these other developments in that area, that would just remove us since we can have some really good foresight. And the other thought too is seeing how our hotel numbers are at zero. Certainly the pandemic happened after the general plan was approved. But do we have a concern about not getting additional hotel space with all these added corporate offices being built in the next few years? The project we saw this week at the Planning Commission meeting was originally a hotel, but then over time it's changed now to R&D building. So thoughts and concerns, and wondering if there's a way that we can have some input to help shape a little bit more of what's happening.
So can I weigh in, Madam Mayor? I agree very much with both John and Audrey's comments, different comments, but so not only have we seen two potential hotels go away, one on the project you named, Audrey, and then also the State Lands was going to be a hotel at one point, but we've also lost two hotels. So we lose the Red Roof Inn and we lose the Holiday Inn eventually. And so that is a significant, I think about that because, as you know, hotel revenue is a significant part of the city's income. It's one of the reasons why we can afford substantially higher services per capita in terms of investment, general fund per capita than our neighboring cities. So I do think about that. And that's why that the fact that we've hit this limit on the Bayside, I think really it's one reason I'm glad we're talking about it, really merits reflection about whether we want to allow additional development on the Bayside at that scale in the near term. Now, having said that, I also believe on the peninsula in this economy that at-grade parking lots are almost a sin. And there are a couple of very large at-grade parking lots still over on the Bayside. So I think that's an interesting question. But I do, to your direct question, Audrey, I do think about losing hotel rooms and it's the kind of thing that'll chip away. And all of a sudden, we go from having 3,000 to, 2,000. That's a really meaningful difference, 3,500 to 2,000 or something. I worry a little less about amenities for a couple of reasons. One, we do see things like Topgolf coming in. There are a number of restaurants over there. And then every hotel has a restaurant. So I think hotels can become, especially if the Bay Trail becomes more activated, I think a lot of the hotels will wind up, I hope, doing better business for the workers over there and the people who are coming over more often and more frequently. So I worry a little bit less about that. And then just since I have the mic, I agree very much. I worry, as John does, about how we create a neighborhood over on Rollins Road. I know Donna and Ann spent a lot of time thinking about that with the working group. But I'm all for creating incentives for services like supermarkets or indeed civic services like a branch library. And I think the challenge is it's not our land. You know, when you look at Mission Bay, that was largely, I forget, 2 or 3 parcels basically that came together. And so you really could do a master plan. And here we don't quite have that luxury. But I agree with John that if we can find better ways to incent inclusion of these, not just, 5,000-foot coffee shops, but real neighborhood services, that would be a good thing over there. But Donna, you probably have a point of view on that, having served on the working group.
Okay, yeah, I have a couple things on hotel and that, but maybe
I also don't want us to forget movie theaters and other entertainment spaces, because growing up in Burlingame, we had the bowling alley over in LaGrange, we had the movie theater in Burlingame, we had the Hyatt Regency movie theater. And as kids, we were able to ride our bikes or we would take the bus and we could go do those things with our friends. We don't really have that anymore. We need to lose that opportunity for development on the bayside or on the long term.
As part of these developments, though, we are losing standalone restaurants. And most of those standalone restaurants along the Bay Shore, their land is now more valuable as a 10-story office building than they are as a restaurant with a bay view. And I personally actually don't have any desire to go into the hotels. I'm not sure I know they have them, but it's usually more filled with people that have come in or out of town and are using that. But I think we miss out on some of these restaurants, and a lot of them got killed during COVID. And I think that unless we're encouraging how to bring that back in, we're gonna lose people. Even Max's or Benihana's is kind of on a development piece that could be something else. And so a lot of these along the Bay Shore there have a more valuable ROI as something else, unless we provide an encouragement opportunity.
Yeah, I have a very similar comment. So regarding standalone, I grew up in San Antonio. We didn't have as much going on in our downtowns as now, but it was all about being over in the Bayfront. And that was where our restaurants were, and that was a destination. Well, a destination, you need some reason to go. So personally, I feel like if we plaster a bunch of tall buildings there, at some point there's no view, there's no there, there's no reason to be there. So I feel like if we're gonna do an incentive, maybe we need to talk to some restaurant operators and ask, what, maybe it's not solvable, I don't know. How do we do that, right?
Yeah, I can give a little, I can comment a few things, and Peter, please don't comment, maybe still help. So a couple of things. I've been meeting with the hotels through the chamber because they're all on the board of directors there. And what's interesting about the hotels is that we're at like probably 65% occupancy, but the rates are well below what they were at COVID. So Michael, in reality, by taking out some of the lower end hotels, you're sort of forcing people into the unoccupied rooms. So, and I think what will happen is when we get back to 90%, 80 to 90, 95% occupancy, and the rates get back up to $400 or $500 a room a night average in some of these hotels at Hyatt. There were still ones that were lower than the Hyatt. Then, of course, developers will come back in and build because now it's going to make sense, right? So, in reality, taking out some of the less attractive hotels or red roofing, we all know that was not that most amazing place for you to stay. What it will do is it will sort of drive traffic and economics into the other hotels. to allow them to be a little, you know, to be more likely to sustain. You're less likely to tear a hotel down or have it converted to housing or something if it's actually making it economic. So right now, there's a lot being spread pretty thin and everybody's doing kind of So taking a few of them out is actually probably gonna be good, and will over the long term drive our TOT up. Sort of on the restaurant, I have been talking to a couple of restaurateurs that are looking at standalone freestanding restaurants over there. And the cost to construct right now for them is prohibitive. Like, the only way that they're gonna be able to even remotely build is they're actually gonna have to build bigger than they thought they were because they get some economies on the bigger and then they can maybe make it pencil. So what we might want to think about is how do we take some of those at-grade parking lots and allow restaurants to be built on them, especially along the shoreline. I'm thinking like Kirkland property and kind of, you know, the enterprise property and kind of all the way down that way. How do we let those, some of those parking spaces go away that we know we don't need because they're sitting empty and allow those standalone freestanding buildings to be built in a way that makes sense. So anyway, those are, we can talk the economics of that a little more, but that's been the problem. At $1,500 a square foot to build, they're not penciling. It compares to say like Florida, where someone recently built one, and it was, you know, maybe 600 a square foot to build.
We also have to, any project out there would need the restaurant included, and has to do the above, that you have to add 13, 17, whatever.
So I think those are some of the rational, those are the economic reasons why we're going up.
Yeah, I think studying prior efforts at Mission Bay makes a lot of sense because I'm in the tech space. Let's face it, employers don't want their people to leave the building for lunches.
Yeah.
And they're bringing in lunches. So the people that are benefiting are the dish, DoorDash and, you know, catering type of things, which could be anywhere in the Bay Area, not necessarily local. But we have to study the human pattern of what's going on with each of these development programs. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but if we don't understand that, we can create all the incentives we want, but if they don't pencil out financially or there's no traffic of people, there's a lot of thought that these all our buildings are going to add to Broadway district. Not 100% sure about that, based on kind of the human patterns of what's going on with the development. I'm for the commercial development because I do think it creates somewhat of a community destination from enjoying the baseline and having a better experience. We go along where, you know, Peninsula Crossing is going in or projected to go in. Nobody wants that. It's all parking lot. It's ugly. People don't enjoy it. They stop at Broadway and then go back the other direction. So there is some benefit, but we really need to understand what, like 5 years ago, we wouldn't have thought about companies sponsoring lunches at no cost to their employees, people staying in the building. That's what's going to happen, right? So I think there's kind of, it's worthwhile looking at Mission Bay and what happened there, what were the services that naturally came in because of the need of employees. Certainly there's a pattern of more restaurants that may have existed prior to the development along, particularly along the bay. And those restaurants are benefiting because they go out at night. But that's kind of my perspective, is that there's just new patterns. We need to mix it into how we plan and then create the right incentive. I'm concerned about it. For the most part, most of the other hotels are for the development because they project the higher rates and the higher things. So I agree with Don in terms of I don't think TOT is going to suffer in the long run. I think it's actually an incentive, but you know, the other services, the other interests, you know, that those cafes that are projected in the plan for the process, they'll probably benefit because it's convenient, it's downstairs, people may stop for coffee or something to eat on their way out. But we need to understand the broader pattern.
I'm gonna open it to members of the public really quick. So I know we have, is your card ready? Okay, and I know Andrea and we might have come on that. So let's check online first. Do anyone online? No? All right, so it's members of the public. Peter, why don't you come up and set your card, Andrea, you come up next.
It's a little small for me. Okay.
They built it for a short.
Welcome to the element.
Exactly. I wanted to say thank you because, we're raising our family around here. Burlingham's a great city, and a lot of that goes to this body of people. So I really appreciate that as a person. I also happen to work here, which is a luxury, and I really appreciate the ability to do so. There's a lot of thoughtful planning that's occurred over time, and I'm trying to bring that here, as well as our capital partners. So a lot of the feedback that I've heard from today, saw in the commission hearing earlier this week, and just reading the staff report and just trying to be aware of the situation, and I would like to offer up my opinion on some of it. First, the acknowledgement of this housing element being approved is important. We are an affluent community. A lot of the affluent communities in the peninsula have not have a housing element approved, which is a really big danger. So kudos to this being approved. Specific to industrial demand, we're looking at a lot of that right now because that's what actually pencils. We have capital that will go take that down. In Burlingame, most of the industrial lots are built to 0.75 FAR, which is about the maximum lot coverage that you can do for industrial property. Two-story industrial doesn't work. It's kind of an unproven market in really urban settings like Tokyo. Seattle has one. It will work, but it probably isn't going to work in Burlingame. And so the existing industrial stock that you have is probably what we will have. We'll get improved, but the numbers won't drastically change from what they are because of low lot coverage. One thing about the projects that we're working on and some of our peers, they're going to bring a lot of jobs. And, this is a nice community to live in. That's one of the sales pitches that we give to biotech is that you can work and live and shop and play. And it's all here in Burlingame, so stay here. With that will come more housing needs, and that's kind of a forecast. So outside of the current housing element, the next one, a long time, we'll need to have that in consideration. And the point I wanted to hit on was the Bayfront would really benefit from a 18 6-hour work community where you're living and working there. You're not right now. Housing is not allowed on the Bayfront. That's an obvious one to me, but you can build type 1 construction and benefit from the heights. You get views, and then if you have the size of it, you're getting great impact fees, and then the services will come. So there's a couple towers down in San Francisco, like Infinity. They have groceries on the ground floor. That works, and we could find capital for that. Same thing for downtown and Broadway. The height limit restricts the amount of density that you can get in those neighborhoods. Thus, the current owners are not incentivized to sell. They're protected by Prop 15. There's a threshold, and I don't know what that is, where you get, Well, sorry, I have a mouthful.
No, please.
You can build multifamily at 8 stories, a type 3A product type, which is 5 floors of wood, 3 floors of concrete. It's very successful. It's very tried and true. That allows you to do is the first 2 floors of concrete can be retail. So you have a 20-foot clear retail center, 1 floor of parking or 1 floor of housing. So you get 6 stories of housing. That can be done. We did that in Oakland, over in Jack London Square. Very successful building, won a lot of awards. Love to see that here, but that would require a zoning change. So that's where we stop, because I go talk to capital sources about a project like that. They're like, CEQA zoning change in the city? No way. That's where it stops. So if there's going to be more housing need because of the large amount of user groups coming to Burlingame, two ideas that came to our head, just as an outsider, was density on the bayfront with housing product, because you can build cylindrical towers and that will work. Or is there a way to do, type 3 construction or type 3B construction downtown, where you can find a site where it fits? It'll fit the mold. It won't be any higher than the office building on Primrose or the new project that Sarah's Regis and Dostar's building. That's about the height that it is. So, food for thought. This is a outsider, capitalist perspective. So bear with me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Andrea Papajohn. I'm a resident here. Just want to thank you so much for this meeting. It is just really great to hear some of these topics. I'm here to listen and learn. I have a couple questions and comments. My first one is about the office and R&D that's being developed, and we're kind of over and above the general plan. So I'm just wondering, are we anticipating that it will be occupied? I don't know. I'm just a question. How do we know if we are building more than what we kind of plan, whether it's going to be occupied? I mean, I'm actually all for development. I think it will bring additional community benefits. I've read how some developments are bringing great community benefits, and it brings construction jobs. So I'm not opposed, but I just hear trends of remote work, and other companies that are coming and going to, occupy that space. And then my second comment is about the urban water management plan. And I guess as we have increase in development, and then our demand for water goes up. And then looking ahead in the future, as we might enter another drought, or we'd be likely to, like, how do we cut back on, like, let's say we had to enter another drought emergency, how do we cut back on water usage with that new development? I know just enough to be dangerous in the urban water management plan. It's a really big document, but when we do enter a drought, let's say we enter a stage 2 and it's emergency and we have to cut back a certain percentage, then and there's a lot of negotiations in Bosca. So I'm just interested to know, just being cautious about our water usage in a drought. Thank you for your consideration, your time.
Okay, yeah. Well, thanks, just great conversation. Thank you so much. I think what's interesting is we think the work is done, but it never is done. And I think even though we had a big lift for 3.5 years when we passed the general plan in 2019, we've done this specific plan, I'm hearing it's really worth us taking another look if the moment is right now that particularly the bayfront is starting to take shape. What can we do to get the outcomes we want? For embarking on this tinkering efforts to plan for the future. So thanks for the great conversation. Really insightful here.
Just a comment on the difficulty of being a commissioner. When these projects come and they do their EIR, they always say, well, there's no impact on the overall. So reviewing these one by one and always having it say, it's like reviewing spaghetti sauce, right? It's in there. It doesn't feel right. And just a specific hobby course I have is traffic. The traffic impacts are already scaring me, right? The latest Peninsula Crossing EIR said there'll be 8-minute delays at the traffic lights on Broadway. That is going to really be a quality of life situation for residents. So I think we really need to look at traffic.
But I would also argue that on the water, I'm nervous about that too. And maybe, we have our reach codes that have been hitting on gas and electric. I almost wonder if we shouldn't be really actually looking at how could we set reach codes better for water And because you do look at some of these buildings, 50,000 gallons a day, which is unfathomable to me and my house, but people gotta go. And so how do we maybe improve that? Because I think water usage and cooler demand are a big deal that they're just as important as some of these other reaches.
And just on that, there is about 5 goals that we're working on as council. Peter's working on this. One of them is recycled water, and we just got $1 million grant that we're working with consultants to figure out how to do pipe and which I think is going to be, you're 100% right. It's really critical to solve for the future. I was listening to a professor at the University of Wisconsin talk about how much water is on the world, how much then fresh water is on the world, and how much potable fresh water is on the world. And it's like it's 20 spot, and it's just sort of it's a worldwide problem, and we don't want to contribute.
I think the other question is, they are interested are actually starting work. I think that we do have a number of projects of apartments and so I'd like to kind of see where we are today and what projects they are the program. We don't really know, right? We know what we've approved, but we don't really know what's happening. But I'd like to see some. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd just like to echo a few concerns of the commissioners, but for once, actually, I am very concerned in the long term about actual traffic along the Bay Shore. Normally, I'm less sympathetic to that than say housing affordability or quality of life, but there's only 3 ways to get into that area, and there's only so much right of way, even if we wanted to add more lanes to get in there. And so, when I'm thinking about long term of that area, I'm also thinking about what are ways we can leverage the resources and the location there, like perhaps the Bay Shore, to reduce the number of car trips in and out of that district and also within that district. I think that a lot of the big biotech proposals have done pretty well at orienting towards the Bay Shore. A lot of restaurants are also oriented towards the Bay Shore. I think that's something that if it's not explicitly put out in the zoning, there should be heavily encouraged like it already is. And I've also very briefly brought up housing in that area to some of my commissioners, and it sounds like there have been very in-depth discussions on that in the past. But in a completely perfect world, pie in the sky, housing does make sense to me in that area without logistical constraints because it allows for density, it has beautiful views, and also it would be much closer commutes to work. People would theoretically use their cars less, or perhaps not at all, depending on the other infrastructure in the area. So that's notwithstanding any other issues I'm sure we'll discuss tonight.
And just to sort of recall back, and Michael, you've been on more REMA cycles than I have, but part of the issue, I think, Kevin, on the Bay Shore with regard to housing is we don't have any schools out there. So now we really have a problem where we're trying to get a lot of people back and forth at 8 and 5. So we'd have to figure and work closely with our school district to figure out how to manage that situation. That was one. And then the second is that, the hotels are the economic engine of that area. So if we rezone, we're likely to lose almost all our hotels for housing because people will turn hotels into that. Or out of 10, maybe 5 would get probably 3 envisioned. And so then we have a problem of a lot of people without a lot of services, and then we have a problem of losing out of our time. But that's been the prior discussion. What was the change? Michael.
Thank you, Donna. So I love this conversation. I think this is exactly the reason we all get together to think about the fabric of the community that we're building collectively. So I don't think they're right and wrong answers right now. I think they're good questions. The Council and Planning Commission in the past have had long discussions about housing on the Bayside. And maybe this is a cycle where we have that conversation again. I do think having rezoned Rollins Road for a housing neighborhood. I'd worry a little bit about diluting, about redirecting housing builders over to the Bayside. I realize it would be attractive, but I worry about losing, I think we need to try to achieve critical mass in Rollins Road so that it can become a neighborhood. Also, there is an issue about getting to our local schools if you put housing out on the Bayside. So I think it's a great conversation. I'm glad we're having it. I think we may have, I think maybe this isn't the right cycle, but I think it's a good time for the conversation. And then, well, with respect to water, that's a very complicated question. And Peter can probably speak to it with respect to Bosca. I will say that our ability to buy additional water rights is going to renew. And so we can acquire water, which is one reason why we ought to think about how much development we expect, because we have the ability to increase our water supply through acquisition, just so everybody knows that. And then, of course, there is the effort to try to do better with recycling water, which is one of the mayor's working groups that that got created. And then finally, I had the hope that there might be an ability to create a much more robust shuttle system. We took a bit of a run at that and hit kind of a brick wall of bureaucracy, I would say, and also funding. But that remains, I think, an opportunity for the Bayside. I still think a much more robust shuttle system moving clockwise and counterclockwise would alleviate a lot of those vehicle trips, a lot of them. So, there are other levers we can pull on some of these issues.
Just quickly, didn't we also have I know it might also be pie in the sky, but didn't we also have a bridge or something we were thinking about, a bike? And we moved people, bike, actually, we had that already, never mind. No, we didn't, we had that, never mind, I'm in the wrong part.
I think you're thinking wrong.
Yeah.
Okay. Does staff feel like they have some direction?
Yeah, and one thing I do want to add also, particularly regarding the transportation bonus for today's meeting is we did get a grant from the Transportation Authority to do the citywide TDM plan. And so right now we've been doing TDM, transportation demand management, just on a project by project basis. We kind of put together something for our code to just kind of enable it. But doing a citywide plan, I think will help us look at things a little more globally. We actually have 5 proposals from really good firms, so we're having reviews. That will be coming your way as well.
Thanks, Emily. I'm sure that was, it's really, and what's really cool is Community.org is doing a lot of county-wide work to help provide some technical assistance for facilitation. So it's a big lift, but it's something we needed for a long time. So thank you, staff, for
Great. Anyone who needs to take a break, please feel free to step out. We'll continue along. If you need to use the fire break or anything, have yourself food, questions, yeah, go to water. Okay, all right, great. I'm gonna go ahead, we're gonna start on item C, which is multi-unit residential standard.
Great, this is something we've been discussing a lot, staff level. This is a bit of a grab bag item, so there's really 3 pieces to it. And my thought is to just do the presentation first and then maybe break them item by item.
Yeah.
So the 3 things we're going to discuss: condominium conversions, missing middle housing, and people that are the memo. Give some background to these. For condominium conversions, this is something that has come up over time, and during the housing element update, there was, people would ask, why do we have this regulation in books that says that no building smaller than 20 units condos. This is a regulation that has been on our books since 1981. For those of us of a certain age, there was a lot of condo conversions going on at that time. It was really big complexes of urban conversion condos. it's left. So it was meant to be kind of preemptive restriction to preserve rental stock and not just have it. However, on the flip side, condo conversions, those condo conversions can be sort of like affordable communities. So there's kind of there's two pieces to the discussion. It is a trade-off. Older apartments tend to rent for less than new apartments, so that would naturally occur in affordable housing. There's lots of buildings here. They're older, perfectly serviceable, well-maintained. They're not renting at top dollar. They don't have at the same time, those would also make them less expensive as condos. Have all bells and whistles, but it is going to. So the housing element kind of walked a tightrope a little bit and did say to retain the current limitations, but also part of this was that this was a version control. We started by saying, let's revisit that and say no more than 10 units per year to be converted. But then we went back and left the old policy in place, but we still have that year limitation on there. So there are options, whichever way we want to go. We can either amend that policy in the housing element or not. Part two, missing middle housing. This is something that we have also discussed during the housing element as well as projects. Missing middle that refers to middle density. So what a lot of cities tend to get is either single family homes, small developments, or really big developments. We don't see a lot of townhouses, things like that. Middle market, so they also become middle market. I wouldn't say middle class, these are still expensive. So we built townhouse early game is $50,000. So that's still a big lift, but that's only half the price or like half the price of a single family. So they are relative. The challenge is how to make this happen. If it was canceling out, the market would be reduced. So you do see the higher density projects because that intensity of development. However, there are levers that can be pulled. So the Hanson at 1008 Carolyn Avenue Somerville project is an example. That was done by a requirement. There's 22 townhouses that were included in that development, and that was built into the zoning. The reason was the time there was concern over the interface between the multifamily development and single family housing next door. So the code said for the first 2 stories, certainly. I think the developer has. They would want to go on the record, but our understanding is they would not have necessarily built this. Having said that, it turned out nice, and 22 for sale condo townhouses. They're nice urban design. It kind of worked out, and the developer is happy with how it turned out. So wouldn't have happened on its own, but that maybe that's the way. To a little deep in it. So we did want to talk to the Planning Commission and City Council about other thoughts that we have encouraging, dividing, what have you, these types of smaller scales, density, housing. And last but not least, so these are all kind of related, but also quite different, is the prospect of what's called a future work every minute. This is something that's really come to the forefront with the newest development projects, the village being. There are units that are either advertised or expected to be 1 bedroom, but in fact the bedroom is completely outbuilt, so there's a place to put the bed, not have the bed right in the space of the studio apartment. But door allows it to not be considered a bedroom, so that kind of allows under building codes.
Question on that. I thought egress or bedroom notion was pretty factor. Egress, 70 square feet.
Yeah, that would be if it's a bedroom.
Right, the door requirement or closet requirement really is legally part of it, or is that wrong?
Yeah, so and the reason these have been approved is so they look at the whole unit design and is there adequate egress in the unit? So that includes both the door to the main corridor as well as whatever window for doors or balconies or living space. So if as a unit as a whole, egress is adequate, it would be approved. So the lack of a door may be part of that. Lack of a window may be part of that. And the reason we see this is that it's a very efficient way to get more units, and particularly if you think about it, if you have a bedroom and a living room next to each other, you've got a wider frontage on the building. If bedroom is a sleeping alcove at the back, you can have a narrower frontage, which means you can put in more slices of bread, so to speak, and you get more units. So for the Village of Burlingame, the objective was to have as many units as possible. There may be a little bit of fire divorce as and sort of hold on. Bedroom is it is something that could be regulated through zoning standards if this is something that's considered an issue. There's different ways that you can either say, like it's a different unit, but at the same time, it's we are seeing more of these, and it's not just the affordable developments, whether bulky or bedrooms or the great developments. That may be a little different and may be in a better position to make that kind of choice of passing on the unit. I'll just put on the record, the intent of the village is not to provide substandard units to anyone. It's a nicely designed building. These types of units are found in market rate as well. It's just a way to provide as many affordable housing opportunities available as possible. Should we not have these kinds of units, there will probably be less units per building, and maybe that's an acceptable trade-off. But that's kind of how all this works. So, should this be something of concern? The zoning amendment could be relatively straightforward. It's just an objective standard of the layout, what is required for a bedroom. I'm happy with that. Kind of independent of what building code allows, but certainly the zoning code would be a little more restrictive. But before we go down that road, we want to get a sense of typology. We haven't seen a lot of suburbs generally, but they are kind of here.
All right, so I think we're going to take these sort of talking about one at a time, not the public comment on one at a time. But I'm going to start with the last one, that kind of thing. And we can discuss it pretty quickly. So the last one would be this notion of the junior one bedroom unit. I'll give a little background on it, which is council member Michael and I had a couple meetings with tenants of the village of Burlingame, who have made it. They're being marketed as one bedrooms, which they are. They're junior one bedrooms. But people are surprised when they go in and find that it doesn't have a door, it doesn't have a window, because they're calling it one bedroom. So there's it's more like a studio, treated more like a studio. So it's a nomenclature thing, and we've met with them and we've had a discussion about it, and there is a way for people to see the unit before they take it. So they're definitely trying to make sure people are comfortable with that, and apparently some are. But I'll tell you, just having looked at the demand of that property and what's been immediately filled, what's been immediately filled are all the 2-2. The 2-2s at 50% below median income are done. Everything else is, we still have 48 units to lead in that project. You know, that makes, yeah, yeah, and so, so anyway, that, there's still units available, a variety, there's a few two-bedrooms that may make the one, that's telling us that these are the less popular, kind of, unit, or the higher demand of the two. That said, part of the feedback we're getting is people see it and they don't want to live, have a bedroom that doesn't have any kind of. And there might be ways to solve it, like, you know, so then to put a window in it, or, you know, putting a door in it, I don't know, but anyway, we just wanted to bring this up to you for conversation, and so I'll open it up to Audrey.
Yeah, just a couple thoughts. I'm looking at this sample for one. I can see how this could be maybe a little bit better received if maybe the doorway opened onto natural daylight, so that even if you're in the bedroom, you could see out the window, you know, so the door was on the north side of the plan and looking out doors, and that might be a little bit more attractive. But my question mainly is about, I have a question, and which is the purity of how we design bedrooms in the residential, all the R1s, all the homes in Burlingame. We know that a bedroom must have a door, a light, natural ventilation, not necessarily a closet in the city. But one of the triggers for parking is 4 bedrooms. Once you exceed 4 bedrooms, you have to have a 2-car garage, a 1-car garage home. And how you get away from that is that the 4th wall in the bedroom is 50%, or the opening is 50% or larger, so that it's not bedroom, basically it's not a room. And so this, by looking at it in plan, this just looks like, oh, I'll add a barn door on here, and I'll put a door on this bedroom, and it's a bedroom with a door. Whereas it's kind of a different situation when we have this 50% of walls that open on to a bedroom. So what I worry about is that if this becomes a popular, and it's ready to go this way, and the educated homeowner sees this being approved, well, why can't I have a 4th room in my house? I'm not using it as a bedroom, or 5th room. A 5th room, I'm not using it as a bedroom, but I have just a doorway going in, and then we call it a bedroom from a planning perspective. But how do we define that? I think that that's just it. Positive. I'm sorry.
Okay. I think Andy then John. Andy,
Yeah, so one of the things that I know is complex over at the lake, they have these 2 bedrooms, but what they do is they actually, on some of the 2 bedrooms, they're called 2 bedrooms, so they're really a 1 bedroom. What they do is they actually just have a partition, right? So people can just pull across when they want to, and then just open it when they want to. And maybe that's another option, that just instead of a solid wall, just have a retractable partition that could allow them to do this, and then still allow natural light into the rest of the space.
I've actually lived in 2 junior 1 bedrooms. And this is a lousy plan. Usually they work better with the bedroom on the window side and then opening side by side to the living space, putting it in the bathroom and the kitchen on the corridor side. And yes, I've lived in one with a retractable door so that, okay, I don't want you looking into my bedroom when I try to do dinner. And you can do that, but then it's not, it's still making a more efficient space. And I lived in another one without it. They have them over at next to the Anson, the
Power.
North Park. North Park has them. And they work fine, and they're a good, you know, they're a more efficient than a full 1 bedroom, and a lot more open.
Yeah.
But this one being narrow and trying to maximize units to window, I understand why, but it's not a comfortable one. And so I could see why somebody wouldn't be as happy, but they're still very livable.
Yeah. And we've only received, one or two comments where, and some of them are getting filled. But we wanted to bring it to everyone's attention to see if we had it.
Oh, sorry, but there has been then people saying, I want a 2-bedroom, but yet you have one person.
And that is.
And it's like, well, wait a minute,
not
that
allowed.
defeats the purpose of affordability. You want it cheap, not,
No, that's
you
not
have a
allowed.
need.
Yeah, there's covenants in that deed over there that says you have to have one tenant per bed. So, and I looked through every single one, and we'll have a report out about that project in a few months, just about where we are with these things, kind of what feedback was. But, and there are a number of there are 2 bedrooms and 4 people living in, which is great, and there's some 3 people, which might be 4 sooner than later. And there were a couple of 2, but mostly 3. The families are definitely.
So I have 2 questions. I didn't initially really understand where this was going, but so really this is what in the olden days I would have called a studio, but I don't know. So the issue is really, are we going to be codifying something like this in fairness? If it can go on and then this has a name and it's been done before and there's a history of it, and not only in the village, but also could this have been a condo? Could this have been you're saying globally for Burlingame, this is what we're talking about. Do you want to say this is an okay arrangement? That's what the question is.
Yeah, the question is,
Okay.
the issue really was, there, in some cities have mandated that you have a window in a bedroom. So if you have a bedroom, if you have a plan, you have a bedroom, you must have a window. So we don't have that requirement. And then this is the question about, this is kind of not what it is. So we, it doesn't have to be really solved today, like we don't have to say yes or no. I just wanted everyone to be aware of it, and we're getting some feedback on it. But I agree with Kevin, if it meant that the project could only have 100 units instead of 132 units, because everyone has to have a window, are you gonna give us 32 units of affordable housing? Because 2% of the applicants will only come there if there's a window.
Like, I think the other question is, I'm sorry, but if these 1 bedrooms are not being taken up regardless if there's a window or not a window, it's really got to kind of buildings, right? Because 2 bedrooms are taking up a lot quicker and more with that, get more people in and more people in. Maybe that's another discussion.
Right.
Yeah, let me just interrupt. I see there's no questions. Part of this, where this comes from is, we get questions on the south side. How could the city allow this? So we want to at least say, so far we've said, well, the reason is kind of give all the reason. Possible of that. And if we're okay allowing it, and we just say it's a design issue, then the typology, then that's good for us to know, but we do kind of want to know, like, and if we do, what would be the things to look out for?
Also,
When I do Emily first real quick, and then we'll do.
Sure, I'll be quick. I mean, at a high level, I think the more variety we have, palette of options, and if that includes we can get more affordable units without a bedroom window, I'm okay with that. This may be poorly executed. I think there's ways to do it that could be better. But I think I would love to brainstorm with staff if we're having trouble filling that. I did not realize that. There are some really creative ways for that. And there would be many people that would be delighted to have a single unit like this in the window. And we can find people on the so I think it's fine to have more affordability that offers maybe not for the ship.
and I agree with this unit type as well. I think it's about creative designing. You could design a clear story window up and near the top and above the closet. And it's just a feeling of seeing natural daylight. It's morning, it's day, and it's night or whatever. So I think that's the kind of thing this sense in reviewing plans.
I just want to throw out there, just like, maybe virtually this housing presentation lately, but the thing is, social inequity or one of these terms. And I think you need to really be careful
with the window and such that we don't. I would want to make sure this is like a general accepted type of arrangement, not that someone comes back to us and says we're not treated the same as the guy with the 2-bedroom skinny floor. We don't have enough light. We don't have this and that, because it is a very. I hear a lot of this stuff at these conferences going on, and so you'd want to not be the first one on the block to be saying this is an okay arrangement. That's all.
These are allowed in market rate and below market affordable BMRs, so they're equally allowed, and I think market rate developers are also. What do you think? Remember this?
That are the developers doing studies. They're not gonna go to ourselves, so they're doing this, using some of the things they do.
And these units are more, can be less expensive, and so, but I think Audrey, you made some really good points, which is like, would you have a closet that was a foot lower with like a clear story window up there that let natural light from the front? Could you have a sliding panel door? So I think the key to this, Kevin, it sounds like everybody's okay leaving this design in place, but with the suggestions when they come through with these junior veterans of have you thought about ways to bring in more natural light? Does that make sense? Perfect, that's all we need on that.
Yep.
Okay, and I think the rationale behind this is Emily had it good, which is we want a variety of options and variety of things for different people. Some people may love this. When Mary Hopkins, she cracked me up and goes to her and goes, you live in a cage. She's like, I like everything dark. There are people who like to live in dark, but they don't want to have. Oh, so Mary. Don't tell her. I know it's not public. Don't tell her. Maybe come out of the cage. Yeah, exactly. She's the bestie, so I can say it. But some people are gonna be okay with this. They like my youngest daughter is like, I love darkness. So there's just different people like different things. But I think offering them the option would be good. Yeah. And then we just know, Kevin, that you can tell the tenants when they come in, we can say, we're offering a variety of things. If this doesn't work for you, we really understand. There are 10 other buildings that have affordable units you can apply, and maybe okay. Let's move on to trying to decide if Miffy Middle will be easier from the Miffy Middle maybe.
Have the same.
They're kind of tied together a little bit, but let me ask, are there any public comments on the window conversation? Does anyone have any thoughts? Okay, good. Anyone on the, I'm just gonna take them like throughout. Okay, second one, Missing Middle housing. So this is another really interesting thing I think we're hearing a lot about at the conversations, at these real estate and housing conferences that we all attend. So I would just like to open it up to your thoughts, planning commission and council, about ways that we could, should we require some Missing Middle units like for sale in some of these properties, or are we maximizing units, John?
So we're a little different in that we don't have open land where we're gonna say, let's go develop a community. My cousin down in LA, they are in a development of 3,500 square foot lots, and they are getting a 2-bedroom house, but it's almost a townhouse or almost a condo community, but not all attached, but they're small lots. And so I don't know that going in and saying, let's take all of our R1s that are bigger and have all the lots and then build a high density neighborhood in there in the middle of it is the right solution there. And if we were out in Dublin where there's more land, you could say, let's build a higher density community.
You can already do that with SB9.
But harder to do here and still protect a quality of community.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure, and since we're not really gonna get many new condos built due to the cost of insurance and liability. So it's hard to then find where is that entry level that isn't buy a tear down or you're stuck in apartments.
Yeah, I really appreciate John's comment. Kevin, you mentioned like the Anson townhomes. Did I hear you say that the market, like they were on the market for about $2 million? 1.8.
At this point, yeah, they were around 1.6 to 1.8. Now,
So I guess one kind of a stepping back, to achieve missing middle housing, yes, 1.8 or $2 million, less than a $2 or $3 million low home, but it is still a group of folks that have some affluence to be able to be even in that. Or it's a parent who wants their young professional to live in Burlingame that pays for a condo or something. Like it's not like, if that's what we're trying to achieve, a smaller, like more achievable entry level home, that's one thing. I think I'm more keenly interested in figuring out, is there a way we can provide ownership opportunities that really are a little bit more achievable to more working class people? Because that's part of the fabric of what Burlington is. But are there over housing stock, and that's part of the conversation before. So I'm not against saying, okay, new developments, you gotta have more of these condos, but I think we just have to have a reality check. Who are we? It's still a person that's a professional that can afford a $2 million or a $1.8 million home, and I'm more interested in leaning into could we have an old apartment building that we can help preserve that could be healthier and invested, seismically safe, but create maybe a 500 to 700,000 opportunity, or a 3 to 500,000. That's right.
Not in the whole combined.
Yeah.
So I have 2 points. One is I think we need to make sure as a project on Highland that ultimately that buyer ended up buying that property and making it. So we now took 4 units off the market and now have created a 1 unit. So want to make sure that as planning, as we look at our codes, how do we make sure that those stocks stay as what those stocks are and not have somebody.
Regardless of whether they're owned or whether
Yeah,
they're.
I don't ask if they're owned or they convert them to condos or whatever they want to do, but we need to keep our housing stock what it is and not minimize the housing stock. And then number 2 is what I'm seeing in the market today is I see a lot of the older people from our communities that want to move down so they can go to the grocery store, they can go shopping, they can walk to the bakery, and we don't want stairs, right? Because they're getting in their 70s and 80s. They're not ready to go to Sterling. They're not ready to go to one of those types of facilities. They want to sell their product. They want to sell their homes, but there is nowhere for them to go. And we are missing that entire social piece for these people to stay with the community that they've lived their entire lives, because we don't have that. They can't do stairs. So even these condos or townhomes that are being built with multiple stairs, it's taking that generation out of the market. They're just saying, well, then I'm just going to stay in my home and I'll make do with what I have. But they can transfer their tax base, right? They can buy something else after the age of 55. That's much smaller. That gives them the opportunity to size down, and then we get more housing stock that we just normally would have. We don't have that, and I'm seeing a lot of the older generation, 70s and 80s, go around here. They're just not moving. They don't have anywhere to go. And that's been one of our, as agents in the community, that's been one of the hardest things that we're is finding. We have old places on Almer and Ansel and all those places, but they don't have washer and dryers in the unit. Those complexes are not allowing washer and dryers. People don't want to have shared washer and dryers. So we're making. It's been really challenging with HOAs, it's challenging with development sites. I'm not quite sure how to get around it. I'm just telling you what I'm hearing and what I feel.
Yeah, I think that, even in the conversation around missing middle housing, we think of single family and we think of big multifamily, and then we think townhomes as well, right? But I still think that's not capturing the breadth of why people talk about missing middle so much. There are almost a dozen different types of housing that exist between single family and multifamily, right? And I think there's a couple places where types of housing that we just don't exist anymore, like starter homes, can exist really well in missing middle. Not as detached townhomes, but as selling maybe a townhome with one house on the bottom and another house on the top. I went to Savannah, Georgia a few months ago with my brother, and I saw some of the most amazing missing middle I've ever seen in historic townhomes. They were beautiful for 3-story brick townhomes with a partially below grade basement. That basement was one unit. The second floor was another unit, and the top 2 floors were also one unit. So you had a 2 1-bedrooms, and then you had like a 2 or 3 bedroom on the top. And then in the backyard, they had a carriage house, which was someone's garage. But on the second story, there was a studio unit. So on one lot, you had potentially 5 different families in completely different styles of living, and you still got room for parking. But carriage house would face an alleyway lot. I don't think that exact typology would work in Burlingame, but it's an example of how flexible missing middle housing can be and how many different kinds of people that it can serve on a single lot while still having a very wonderful neighborhood feeling. Especially starter homes, things like carriage, the cottage courts, that's what they are. Bungalow courts that just aren't really built anymore. Lots of tiny little starter homes that are just not economical to build any other way than those. And also, I would just briefly say as well that I've seen some attempts to get more of that at the state level. Most of what I see tends to be, okay, it's legal to build single family, it's legal to build big multifamily. We're going to make another category for this other kind of missing middle housing we like, but you have to meet like 13 different requirements in order to qualify for that one little thing. The reason why missing middle housing had so many different forms and met so many different needs is because generally the codes and zoning were a little bit less flexible and allowed people to adapt the built environment and the spaces more towards their needs in the first place. So I think less tends to be more in that respect, and as long as it's tailored, of course, with what the needs looking for.
The only other thing I'll add, Michael, please.
Thanks, Don. I appreciate the conversation. I did want to ask the group to reflect on one of the questions in the staff report, which is this idea, the trade-offs, the public policy trade-offs of taking older apartments and allowing them to become condos. And then, oh, we're not there yet. Okay, sorry, Don, I didn't realize.
Give me 1 second to wrap this up, and then I'll leave with you on the next, okay?
Okay, gotcha.
The thing I would like to say on the missing middle is we do have these EMRs that are targeted for missing middle, and they currently have expirations on them anywhere between 10 years to 55 years. I would like to propose that we just, whenever we DMR something, it's forever. And we just don't lose those. And that's so that 20, 30, 40 years from now, the council aren't going to be dealing with how do we read, this just happened in Foster City. 20 units are coming off. They want to go to market. People were getting kicked out, and then the city had to come in and file the GOs down and subsidize it. I just want to say, going forward, if it were of interest to you, we could just say 55 is almost permanent, because at 55 you're going to be either tearing a building down, or, but if you just said, we want to make them permanent, if that would sort of at least we're not going to have this cycle coming through in 50. We're going to be gone, but I think our next generation. John?
I understand that, but then we just have to make sure that there's an end of life clause in it, in that it's not because we've done BMR forever, this lot is now BMR. It's that for the useful life of the building we approved to have this, it has it. if you're gonna go into a knockdown situation, then you would re-engage on whatever
new
standard is
standards.
then, as opposed to saying the next guy's now saddled with the
Or the
law that
next
we
guy-
made 55 years ago.
Well, or the next guy, maybe we're gonna be at 50% DMR by then, and we're at 20 now, so maybe the next guy's got a more stringent requirement. So, or less stringent requirement, so you're right. It's the life, it would be determined the building, the units would be portable at that level. The other piece that we talked about at council the other day, and we don't have to, we can explore this more, but that's one. The other piece was, when these projects are getting approved, like when the Anthem was approved, the AMI of the county was closer to 100,000, and it's now 175,000. So even when the AMI limits are the same, say 50%, 2%, 50, whatever, the AMI went up so much in the last, 8 years that it took to build it, that the units are, they had to have penciled when they originally were looking at the AMI. They had to pencil it when we built the project. But now there's like a ton of play in it, and so now the people, we thought we were gonna be running the gyms for like 1,200 a unit or 1,000 a unit, because the AMI got it so much, they're running for like 2,000 a unit. So, yeah, well, they're closer to market rent, right?
I mean, for the.
Yeah, so I don't know.
intended target.
I don't know what the solution is on that. I don't even know if it's legal, Michael Dana, but I think could we, yeah, he's looking. It's an interesting question, right? So anyway.
I'll add that we have posed this question to Art, so Art has this housing support service that we signed up for, and we can ask him these kinds of questions. They've got a guy, his name's Tim Davis, and he's got decades of experience in administering affordable housing, so we have been asking him some questions.
It'd be interesting to see what the nonprofit developers, how they handle that. I think it's all the same requirements for the investors to do that versus the for-profit affordable housing developer. Like, is it handled differently somehow in practice, or is it all the same? Because when you're, sort of a values driven with your after.
The not-for-profit affordable housing developers own the land. The land is not the city. They get to keep it. So our affordable housing, our for-profit affordable housing developer, our land comes back to us because we voted into the, if we pay. Well, we can get a
That's a
strong,
whole nother.
but we can get a straw man, you can get someone, you can get another affordable housing developer to buy it. But we can't control it. The affordable housing developers, they have the land. They do not control in the future. But, and then the last one was, I just learned this, and I think it's being brought up at the state level, that it's interesting, so I just want to think about it. So rent control does not apply to affordable housing. Interestingly. So if statewide rent control that's capped at 5 to 10%, which I think goes to 1930, only applies to market rate, doesn't apply to affordable housing DMRs. So interestingly, what was happening is there were times when AMI was going up significantly, so their rents were going up more than 10%, more than what would have been allowed in statewide rent control tax. So there are some initiatives at the state level to tie that in together, because to me, if you're using state public funds to build your product and tax credits and money from the city of Burlingame, I want to make sure that people are staying in the affordable range. So that's just another thing we could follow at the state, or we could, as a city, take the state rent control to be applicable to our affordable units in our city. Just fully DMR, not market rate. They're already in.
I just really briefly wanted to call out at the end of the section on missing middle housing. It talks about a library, pre-review duplex, and small unit, multi-unit buildings that can streamline the permitting process. I think that's a fantastic idea and the way to go, because one of the reasons why missing middle is so difficult, not just regulatorily speaking, is that it works really well at a very small, fine-grained scale, like one landowner, one lot at a time, maybe a very small developer on 2 adjacent lots, and those are more pencil if you have to spend a huge amount of time designing something from scratch and going through a review process. So a library of things that we already know we like, tell people to build is a huge incentive. So.
Great.
I was gonna say that.
All right.
Anyone from the public that wants to comment on this? So you have a little bit of like feeling direction on it?
Can I just add one quick thing, Donna, before we move on? With respect to missing middle, so just to remind everybody, actually the city of Burlingame looked at quite a creative program 3 years ago, which is basically acquiring apartment buildings and then maintaining them exactly for missing middle. That particular opportunity to buy a apartment building for sale that had over 100 units, I forget the exact number. Unfortunately, the co-developer came up short. But Hart, the finance agency that Kevin referred to, has now developed the same program here locally. So to the extent that anyone's in the real estate community and knows of significant apartment buildings that might be up for acquisition, that can be another approach that the city takes. And then, as Donna alluded to on the other one, it becomes then a city asset ultimately. So it's actually it's a pretty neat program, but it's aimed exactly at maintaining missing middle apartments in that case.
It becomes a city asset at the end of the bond,
That's right.
30-year bond.
That's right. And Hart has now mimicked that program, so we can implement it here locally in San Mateo County. We don't have to work with Kern County or whoever it was.
Have a little, we'll do a little study session for you all we did it at our level. Maybe we can do one and report it. And then so we spent, I think, 3 months. Okay.
So, that's B684. Also, easy approval of units
Oh,
for
good.
ownership. So that's very.
What kind of ownership?
Yeah, so just go with that ownership criteria. That's another way.
Yeah.
So, and it's for specifically.
Okay, condominium conversions. Their last topic, 30 minutes. Kevin? Anyone read? Sorry. You did, or you already did?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, we are.
An hour ago.
Completing policies.
Okay, this is probably the most complicated.
So one of the biggest issues that we are having now with condos in general is we have the Davis Sterling Act, and the associations are having a very difficult time in compliance with some of these regulations that are coming down from the state. A lot of people aren't able to get financing for some condos. If they're not in compliance, by the way, I just have a condo on the market now, so I've been dealing with a lot of issues. If they don't have their reserve HOAs that have to be in compliance with many regulatory components, the budget, the reserves, and buildings. So a lot of the condos that have debts in our market now aren't being able to be funded. They have to have a plan. The HOAs have to have plans. So as much as you might want to take some of our units and create them into condos for first-time buyers or other things, you have to understand that there's an HOA compliance issue that is very expensive and very cost prohibitive to a lot of people. A lot of the HOAs are almost $700 a month, which are then taking these projects off. So when we look at condo converting, some of our housing elements or some of our apartments, maybe the TIC route is a little more affordable. But I just want everyone to know this HOA stuff that's going down. It's impacting real estate.
estate market.
Because I brought this up when we were discussing housing element, and it's more because that I'm concerned that we in Burlingame have become one of the highest percentages of just rentals
Right.
on the peninsula. And I think if we do, providing housing for people is a good thing, but if we don't manage the balance of that, I think we then lose some of our quality of life that we bought here. So I think that I'd like to see us manage that percentage a little bit more thoughtfully than just letting it happen. And
Encourage more.
right, so I realize condos probably not the right vehicle as we're seeing, because it's hard to build new condos and it's not easy to manage condo associations. So I think part of this discussion is really the previous discussion is missing middle, and some of the items that you brought up are great, because we don't have flats. And that, there are better models of smaller, groups, because in talking with somebody who owns an apartment building on El Camino, he's not in a position, he's better off just selling it and scraping the whole thing because they can build higher density. So then trying to figure out how to take an older stock at 20 plus units and converting it's maybe not ever going to pencil.
Yeah.
And so we might want a policy, but if it's never going to pencil, it's never going to sell. But in talking to him, it's like, well, maybe it's these smaller ones that maybe a house now or a duplex now, how can we better make it easier for those others to make it into a 3 or a 4 without over-regulating it?
Yeah.
And if we have regulations on the books, I think there are unintended consequences now from 20 years ago. Maybe we need to pull those off and let the market make some of those decisions instead of us having said, no way in hell, you need an extra parking space, you need open space.
Yeah.
And we're preventing a 2-lot from becoming 4 units.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't meet the condo needs.
But it's already got people living in it and driving in and out.
Well, we've seen a few of them along Carolyn in the neighborhood next door where they were taking 2 lots and saying, let's build 4. Well, because we're trying to do it for sale and then it becomes a condo thing and our regulations are different for condos, then it makes it harder to make that whole program work. So like I said, I think if we have regulations that maybe are trying to prevent something from the past, maybe we need to think about taking those back and going to things that are public safety or state things that we can't control versus things that we as Burlingame have put as an obstacle to some of those divided opportunities.
I thought,
Sure, no, go to you, Michael.
sorry, Michael, I thought, had we aligned the standards of apartments and condos? I thought that was one of the work projects.
Yeah, we're still working on that. We
Like
need to
balcony.
amend, there are condo standards and subdivisions that need to be changed. For practical purposes, as we look at projects, they're all particularly open spaces like that, we're pretty small. But that is a cleanup item that we need. Talking about there are standards in the subdivision ordinance that can be at odds with. For rental building.
Michael?
I'm interested in the conversation, to be honest. I think it's tricky. So I'm just a listener here. I just wanted to make sure we talked about it.
There's a 10-unit limit at this time for you.
20.
20? And then you
Well,
mentioned something about
so,
10?
okay, let me clarify. So the code says 20. In the housing element, because we started to kind of tinker with this in the housing element. One of the columns in the housing element programs is you have to state on the you have to quantify every single program. So we said, well, okay, we don't want any more than, we're anticipating that more than 10 units per year or 80 over the course of a 8-year cycle. So that's just been one of the quantifiable objectives for the housing element. I think that was in anticipation that we might change this policy, and then we'd say, well, then let's, so that we're not. Market that relatively version. But the one that's actually on the books in terms of regulations.
A few units, not buildings.
Yes.
And 20,
Oh.
is it 20 units?
Well,
Buildings
it's the
or-
restriction is we have to- minimum.
So the two don't compute, right?
Right.
No, they're different things. So the apartment building over here with 19 units can't convert to condo because it doesn't meet that threshold. The 21 unit one next door can.
But they can only
But the
convert
next one-
20 here.
Well, different issue.
No, but that doesn't align, right?
Yeah, you're right. It doesn't, it's completely infeasible. This is why we brought this up.
So what about the, like, the complex over on Douglas, right? Because I think they wanted to, it's not been built, still sitting vacant. But they kind of wanted to create condos, but they were zoned for apartment. I mean, they had plans for apartment buildings and now kind of wanted to do condos. I think they bought the properties. But I don't know.
Yeah, that was originally was.
But I think he wants to convert it. I can't.
Yeah, there were regulations. Fortunately, that.
But that was under the old code where there was a more pronounced distinction between the apartment standards and other standards. The new code is much less. So yeah, I think in that case, they went the apartment route because it had more flexible standards and the more units. We personally like, well, I should say personally, but on the south level, we do like to see if there is a condo map. An option, something offers to on the maps.
Is there anything in the code or anything like that that talks about having condominium units and rental units in the same building? Does the whole building have to be condos? Or?
The code really doesn't discuss tenancy at all.
Okay.
Other than, yeah, on the subdivision standards, the subdivision ordinance are But, yeah, and that was something we, when we did the code update, we wanted to get out of that. Who cares, like, why should it be any different? So there's, or sure, somebody could mix back to Anson as for sale townhouses and.
Right, that was something I was just gonna mention, is the apartment tower I lived in downtown Houston was a condominium tower, but some of the condos were bought and rented out, and so I lived there as a renter, but I eventually paid rent to the homeowners association there, and I got all these amenities. I knew someone who lived in Webster, Texas, and she lived in a garden apartment complex, kind of like Anson, but one of those buildings were townhomes, and so she owned one there, but she used the same amenities as everyone else in the apartment complex, and she paid a homeownership fee to the same company that ran the whole complex. And so if dedicated condominium developments aren't feasible, and if converting a whole building isn't feasible, I don't know if it's difficult regulatorily outside of the city because of the homeownership fees that are going on or something else, but I think partial conversions, maybe even a couple at a time, that seems like a good halfway point. I haven't seen any issues come up with that, and it's a good way to get it's a good way to encourage homeownership amongst people that are transitioning from renting to owning and vice versa. And it doesn't require like a big cladding and reinvestment in, a park and parking, because it's all part of the same building.
So I will just also give an anecdotal story that I was talking with a developer about some projects that they were looking at downtown, and they told me they're not considering apartments at all, but condominiums only because of just the feasibility right now of apartment rentals. There's huge demand for people want to buy, they want to buy. There's a little bit of pent-up demand, there's not a lot of supply. So putting on things to sell, they told me was absolutely their top priority, which I don't think it So that was an interesting conversation. But I would like to call for members of the public that might want to speak.
Thank you, Donna. Just a quick comment. I just wanted to share that we rented for several years and waited to buy a home until we were really financially could afford it. We really wanted to be fiscally responsible. And so, you know, I can really appreciate how hard it is to get into the market when homes are, 2 million plus here in Burlingame. So when I first kind of was looking at the report, I thought condo conversion, what a great opportunity and option for people to get into the market, first time buyers or, working class. But when I hear more about this middle, when I understand a little bit more about the missing middle housing, I mean, that just sounds really appealing. And if we could streamline the process, like John mentioned, I think that would be great. And I know Sandy's comment about HOA compliance with condo conversion, I mean, that gives me a little bit pause too. So I don't understand those issues, but it sounds like it's harder to convert condos or apartments to condos because of those issues. So I just wanted to share my own experience, and I just appreciate the conversation. Thank you.
I'm going to try to summarize, and you guys let me know how to do that. So I think number one is trying to figure out how to standardize between apartment and condo. And if there's a way to do it with even existing, so, or how we would have variance or something. So say somebody did have a 4-unit apartment building or 6-unit apartment building, and they did want to, they may live in it, they may live in it, so they don't want to sell the whole unit, but maybe they're willing to put a condo map overlay and sell 2 units, and then they can take some of the income from those 2 units and live on it while they rent 3 other units. So there might be, especially in the below 10-unit apartment buildings, ways to sort of think creatively about that. I think we need to standardize the apartment and condo. Number 2 was
Standards in terms of requirements.
outdoor space and probably go to the more flexible. Because the apartments are more flexible, so moving condos to be more flexible. If it's already an apartment building, if people are already living there, and we have a lower parking ratio, who cares? They're already there. It's not like we're gonna, it's already the built environment. So let's take the most flexible built environment that we have and make that the standard, not the most restrictive.
It's removing the barriers.
Yeah.
Barriers that we've self-imposed
Yeah.
that prevent us from moving forward in an
Yeah.
alternative manner.
Some of them just follow the street, right? And then a look at looking at reconciling the cap. So if we're setting some sort of a cap, like you can't do more than 10 a year, but then you can't do a building that's under 20 units, that doesn't reconcile. So how do we say we maybe lower so you can do a building that's 10 units or below, or you just get rid of that. Like you can do any building you want. Like that's one of the silly restrictions. But we'll cap it at 20 units a year, so we don't lose a bunch of our. It's ironic. It's the affordable rental stock, but it's also the affordable purchase stock. And it would sure be nice to give people the opportunity. I mean, I know someone who's rented here for 20 years and been trying to buy. They can afford to buy their unit. The value of their unit, which is probably $500,000, the debt service on that would be paid for by their rent. And so I know they're paying high enough rent to be able to afford a mortgage. They just can't find a unit. Because there's nothing available in the 5 to 7. Plus also first time home buyer programs in the state of California, I think are capped at like 700 or 800,000. So those are like really low down payments and low loans and things. We don't even have any stock that program can apply to here. So people have.
John, before you go on, because we do the time, I have this law about condo developers are responsible for.
Oh, the 10 years.
Yeah, so would that then, with these
See,
kind of
these
things,
are
that
older.
would be.
Yeah,
that
because
would be
these are
gone.
beyond 10 years, right? So they're already 10 years old buildings, but we should look into it to make sure we understand that. The new condos for 10 years, the that buyers can have the right to do the, which is the reason why people don't want to buy this. But once you get past 10 years, and I just want to make sure that if something converted, that wouldn't reset the clock, right?
No, because you do full disclosure.
Yeah.
So similar to buying a house that's 100 years old, you gotta say, all these things are broken. Well, same thing with selling the apartment building.
Yeah.
You're disclosing, yes, I've done this, that's happened, and all of this, and you can see that. Whereas buying a condo the first time, I don't think it should be different, but it is.
And then maybe asking Hart about when they're in their research, if they could look at tenant in common at TIC, which I could see being very effective for like a 2 or 3, like a duplex or a triplex or quadplex, where the owners all know, people all know each other, maybe one person owns the unit. They don't want to sell the whole project if they want to continue to own something, but they'd be willing to sell to their 3 neighbors, maybe a family that owns it, and they want to condominiumize it out for each of the kids and their grandparents or something. I could see those becoming, so how would it, like, part look at, like, see if there's any examples of tenant in common as opposed to condominium? What would be the benefit for them? If Hart has any information on it, it would be great to share out with our community, or maybe the Housing Apartment Association has something.
I just wanted to also briefly add, maybe it goes without saying, or it's already part of some code somewhere, but in terms of, not hopefully losing, not, more importantly than the affordable housing, but the people who have been living in that affordable housing and everything, if there's some way to either encourage or mandate that the opportunity is given for the people who are living in a unit to get first choice to buy the unit. Right, I'm not sure if that's already written in as it is, but that's, I think, something that we should.
Great, that's a great.
No, I just appreciate the conversation.
How smart our people
I
are.
mean, it's great for doing the right things. I think, my takeaways are, we need more flexibility to clear the market across the needs of affordable, mid-market. The patterns are changing in terms of how people are looking at housing, how people are looking at zones and codes and encouraging development responsibly. There's examples out there that we can learn from, or at least study. But I do think the general theme is flexibility. How do we thoughtfully do that without having negative consequences 5, 10, 15 years ago? So just really appreciate the conversation.
Then that did a great job summarizing. Really good conversation.
One,
No, John?
for me, this middle housing piece and conversation is encouraging ownership is a wealth building tool that
Yeah.
we've heard is we screwed everybody because we've not allowed them to have wealth building.
Yeah.
But continuing to flood the market with apartments, thinking that we build more, prices go down, which isn't actually working. And then to say, well, but we're going to keep you cheap so that you don't ever have to buy. Well, then there's no wealth building, and then there's not community building. And then you get fewer people willing to do this and participate at the community level because there's not the same skin in the game.
Rents aren't cheap in this community, even on the low end or the high end. The reality is, wealth building is maybe more economical for those first-time home buyers or those people who have been rented for a while and not want to get involved. So,
Richard Torres did a really good rendition of like the R2, not R2, what is it, SB9, SB9. And he did some really amazing renditions of that for us. This came in front of us architecturally and took from some, I think, a lot of like what Cisco has. Yeah. And it would be really interesting to maybe even have that as part of this conversations and maybe some standards of 2 or 3 different types of models, or even if we have what we have in stock, but we can convert it. One of the
think where we are on single family homes and our capital or height, only allows us to do so much. So if we can think about housing, and I know we're not San Francisco, but if we can increase our height a little bit, we can get a little more density in these units, might be something that might make them even a little. Right, you can get 3 vertical units. Yeah.
So like the rendition you're saying about the
Yeah, and Chicago.
I
Maybe
would
in
like
Tennessee,
row
Tennessee is.
Yeah, row houses.
Yeah.
They're, I mean, like, they're just thin and tall and they're lovely.
Like the ones right over by you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, there's those 4.
Yeah, really. Thank you, and maybe also on the, condo, if somebody does own, say, 20 units on El Camino Real and they wanna, you know, redevelop that to a 3-story building or a denser building, maybe figuring out ways to incentivize condominium over apartments, like by helping waive some of the fees and things like that. To, you know, try to move that to, you know, if you build a condominium and it's priced under X dollars, you know, you go tear down 20 units of apartments, you go 30 units of condos, and you price them under $1 million or whatever the number is, you will be able to have more ability to maybe waive fees. But I just think creating like you say, John.
Well, but those are barriers. Right now, it's insurance and liability. And probably our fees add to that
Yeah,
too,
you're right.
on
With
top
the
of that.
tenure, yeah.
But it's just, the condos that we look at aren't ever gonna get built because they can't pencil.
Well, you know what they do, what I was talking to John Griffin, just to wrap it up, that he said he would build condos, own them for 10 years in apartments, and then sell them. So that model works. Buy it, build them, rent them, and then after a decade, sell them, when you're beyond that's kind of what people study. Okay, any other wrap up or last minute questions? I really appreciate everybody giving that staff to their Saturday morning. Started, a lot of it's dreary and rainy and yucky. So this looks like,
Perfect.
this looks like a way better alternative, sitting home with your partner, or your dog. He gets his favorite. Thanks, everyone. Meeting will adjourn, and please feel free to send any thoughts to Kevin and Ruben. Thank you guys very much. I think these are great conversations. Thanks, Michael.
Good job. And
Thank
thanks for
you.
food with you if you want. Lunch there, so, you have people at home that want one.
Yeah, I'm gonna take a look.